Absolutely, and yeah, there's been a few birthdays in the Azura camp this week. I think Santi turned 58 this week, and still piling on all the.
Will they get their big birthday present? Let's have a look at the scoreboards as they stand as they go into the water. Say hopefully a 3-race day, but let's have a look first of all at the scoreboards. So standings after 6 races, as I said, Sled have this 9-point lead. They've yet to win a regatta. They've been with us since 2014. They've had 3 podium places. They've won 3 races here and they are 9 points clear. So they should be able to close out their first regatta title. Azura then, I think they've been on the podium 2 or 3 times this season already and they're on 22 points. Quantum Racing 5 points back in 3rd. Platoon on 28. Phoenix 31, Prevetsa 32, 34 for Brennasek. So Fergal, they're a little bit of a kind of mid-fleet battle there for Phoenix, Platoon and Prevetsa.
Yeah, I think it's not just about the winner of this and the winner of the overalls. There's definitely other battles going on throughout the rest of the fleet. And 3 races today. Actually, another interesting one to watch is actually to round out the podium, Quantum and Brennasek. There's only a 10-point gap there in over 3 races. Yeah. No, it's not a given that anyone's going to finish in there.
So Allegra 8th, Gladiator and Team Vision Future. So then looking at the circuit standings, as we have said several times, Azura 11-point lead going into this 3-race day. Platoon on 165 and then 5 points back Quantum Racing. And as Fergal saying, Brennasek in 4th, 10 points behind, but 10 points over 3 races. We saw how things went yesterday. There were some ups and some big downs on the very, very even racecourse. Prevetsa in 5th on 190, Allegra 213, Sled 215 and Phoenix 11 in 8th on 232 points. So that's the standings. I wonder whether we can join Jenny Tulloch. We do know that the breeze has been pretty strong so far. They've got about 20 knots. We'll come back to Jenny in a minute, but we caught up with Guillermo Parada and some of the other sailors before they went in the water. Guille Parada, the skipper helm on Azura, and also Harm Muller-Spreer, the owner-driver of Platoon. So Guille, happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you very much. 75 years old.
Feels like it, does it?
A little bit, yes, but hopefully this evening I will take 20 off.
Good. How do you feel this morning? It's a big, big day for the team.
Yeah, we are ready and prepared to whatever it comes. So hopefully we have a decent day and we clinch the season in a proper way. We worked it really hard since last winter and it all comes down to one day. We're in a good position, but obviously we cannot relax. We need to get out there and do our job.
Is there a general strategy for the day?
Yeah, we have it, but I will tell you afterwards.
But in the weather, what are we expecting?
The weather, we are expecting 12 to 20 knots in the afternoon, so condition seems to be better than yesterday, and hopefully a little bit steadier, so we don't have surprises on the race course.
What do you think they will do?
We don't know. We are really focusing on ourselves. For sure, they need to put some points on us, especially on the first couple races, in order to be alive on the third and final day. So we need to be there, and we have a plan.
What's the final briefing? The final things you say to the boys before we start?
Let's go for it.
Good, well done, thank you. So Harmony, how did end of term, last day of the season? Big ask for the Platoon team. How are you feeling?
Not a really bad day yesterday. First, the third, and an 8, but the 8 was a little bit upset. But I mean, it's still 1/3 of the regatta to go, and 3 races. We try what we can, and we'll see in the afternoon what's happening.
The pressure's on them, though, isn't it?
No, it's definitely not on us. I mean, we can. The only thing what we can do is stay good and error-free, and we'll see what's the outcome.
Excited?
Like before, not really.
I don't believe
a little bit, but no. The only thing what you can do is stay calm and positive, and even if you're in a bad corner, trying hard to come back. That's all.
Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
So what do you take from that, Fergal? You know, Harm saying he's not excited. He's excited. He's nervous. Guille's nervous.
I think there's a very different attitude from when you're on the dock, ready to go out, thinking about the briefings that you've had and the debriefs and the day before, to then when you're on the tiller, 5 minutes to go to the first race, and the countdown to your 3 races of the day.
Is that when the butterflies are at their kind of peak, or is that when you're really settling into sailing the boat?
I think when you're lining up, a minute to go before the gun, you're looking around and seeing where other boats are, and maybe you've been in a little pre-start battle. I think that's when all the pressure kind of kicks in and the reality sets in that I've really got to beat that guy.
Tell me a little bit about the start lines, because yesterday the starts were very, very even, especially that third one. So there's a huge amount of pressure on the start line, isn't there?
This fleet, as we've said for years and years, is so tight. If you're not on the money on the start, we've got all the technology to get us on the start line at go, and if you're not there,
Game over.
It's hard to get back in. It's possible, and we've had a few shifty races, but it's hard. It's really, really hard to overtake boats.
Thanks, Fergal. Let's join Jenny Tulloch. The wonderful Jenny Tulloch is on the water. Our eyes and ears, Jenny, it looks pretty breezy.
It is today. I mean, I think everyone is excited to see the Whitecaps out this early and to be out racing, hopefully 3 races on what's the final day. And I think, as you guys heard, the pressure puck has been tossed around the teams a little bit there, with Harm saying it's not on him, with Guiget kind of pretending like maybe they're ahead enough. I think it's going to be a lot of nerves on board the boats. And when the breeze is up like this, the question is, big mistakes can be really costly. But otherwise, if you can get out in front, sometimes it's a little bit easier to stay in front. So, Andy, we were talking this morning in our pre-brief about following your heart. Whose heart do you think has it today?
Oh, it's too hard to call, Jenny. I mean, it really, honestly, for me, it's head and heart. You want the Azura story to play out because it's their home turf. And I honestly think that Guiget's wanted this, or the team have wanted this a little bit more all the way through the season. They're hurting after last year with Quantum in particular, and also finishing up where they did. And I think that Harm has put all the components in place, having learnt from being bridesmaid twice. And I think they were my tip at the start of the season. So it's head and heart, and I'm not prepared to make a call. But go on, Jen.
I think either way, they're good stories. Like
completely.
Azura winning here on home waters on his birthday when he turns 52 to take the 52 Super Series, and then to tie Quantum for 4 Super Series. That would be a fabulous day for the Italians, but again, for the Germans, to be the first team to kind of break the Quantum Azura mold. If Platoon took it today, they'd be the only one to win the Super Series aside from Quantum and Platoon, and they've won twice in regattas here this year, whereas Azura actually has always been bridesmaid in regattas, has yet to actually take a regatta win. So I think period, it's a hard one to go head and heart there. They're kind of, my heart's with both teams at the moment. But I think realistically, if yesterday had gone differently as well. So the way that Harm explained it was the way that their scores went. They had a 1, a 3, and then an 8. They kind of slipped throughout the day. But imagine if they had an 8, a third, and a 1. The day would have looked very, very different. They would have come ashore kind of strutting like cocks, and Azura might have then come ashore feeling like, oh no, we've only just lost points every race. So I think realistically, if they were able to just swipe that last race from their memory banks and come back firing, going, in one race we took 8-point lead and they're only 11 points ahead. I think they've just got to think that through. And I don't know. I mean, there's 3 races today, and really anything could happen. We saw it in the last regatta with lots of penalties, lots of added points being spun on the final day. And I think it's going to be incredible racing.
What do you think the respective strategies will be? I mean, Azura can just sail round, and try and keep no boats between them and Platoon, and the job is done. Azura can try and get 4 boats between them and Platoon, and the job is done. Or Platoon can go out and try and win the first 2 races and just, see what transpires. What do you think the respective strategies will be?
I'm just trying to see right now if they're engaging yet at the moment. In fact, I might just jump down and take a little look-see that way. I mean, if I was Azura, but that's speaking with my match racing hat on, I would be going after Platoon a little bit here on this first start, because it is about race 1. And if Platoon can win and Azura is deep, then they can well stay in the game. And if vice versa, as you just said, then Azura could seal the deal here. But actually looking up there, I'm missing the 2 boats at the moment. I can sort of see Azura mid-fleet there, but I don't quite see Platoon underneath them. But I think the reality is probably that Quantum Racing just keeps their head in just enough to, points-wise, they're 6 or 7 points back, but they're just close enough that maybe both teams are a little bit concerned about them. And instead, actually, as you can see here, Platoon is on their own in the middle, and Azura is nowhere in sight near Platoon. So both teams going very much for their own game plans here. 1 minute, 20 seconds to go to the start of the first race of what's possibly 3 races this final day. And the 2 guys at the top of the leaderboard overall are
side by
just
side
playing
on the
their
start
own
line.
game.
I mean, isn't that fascinating? You've got Azura and Sled lining up side by side. You know, if there's one boat you probably don't want below you off the start line, Fergal, it would probably be Sled.
Given their start in the 3rd race yesterday, started middle of the line and they were
Yes.
off like a slingshot. I mean, everyone had a perfect start and theirs was just more perfect. It was incredible. They had a 100-metre lead halfway up the beat. The guys are on fire and I wouldn't expect anything different today.
So, Jenny, 45 seconds or something like that to go. If you take us through the start then.
Yeah, 40 seconds to go. I think a couple of the teams might even be a time. Well, no, maybe not too late. It's actually a lot windier today, but we've got 30 seconds, and it is, yeah, as you guys said, not an easy spot for Azura to be with Sled. 25 seconds to go. Azura sailing a little bit high, trying to give themselves a hole, but think about how big these waves are out here. 20 seconds now, and I think I'd probably rather be, well, this is a hard one. Gladiator, your boat, your team, Fergal, looks like they're doing decently too. 10 seconds, actually, they're a touch late. Middle of the line, Quantum Racing slingshotting out with 7, 6, 5. No one's going to be over early, it looks like. Quantum Racing is going to take it from the middle, 1 gun, that's it. Platoon also has a really, really nice start down here near the pin, and I think Gladiator also looking good, but as you guys said, Sled's been the team to beat this week. They have been crushing it, and Azura putting themselves just to windward of Sled. That is a really, really difficult spot to hang.
A great start, I think, though, by Platoon. Seem to be bow forward on the line. They've got nice height. They've got real estate to reach into, or just to keep the bow down and rumble, or they can rise from there, Fergal.
Yeah, Platoon and I think you can just, I mean, Quantum are really rumbling there as well, but this angle is a bit deceptive. I think Platoon are obviously the most bow forward boat, and these are Platoon's conditions. They enjoy these conditions a lot, and when they do get off the start line in good shape, they're a very, very quick boat. Downwind especially, we've seen in the past, as soon as they get a clear lane downwind, those guys are off like a robber's dog. And I mean, it's a pretty even start for everyone, but I'd say Platoon, Quantum are the 2 there. And yesterday the left paid in the last race for Gladiator, so they obviously like that, and the conditions are pretty similar to yesterday. A little bit more breezy. Everyone's on the number 4 jibs. You can see there's a long pennant at the top of the jibs. These are the smallest jibs we have. So we're looking between 21, 25 knots for that call to be made, with a probability that it's going to build as you get up towards what we call Bomb Alley, which is between the islands of Sardinia and Corsica. The breeze in this direction really pumps out of there. So the call to go onto these smaller jibs is probably an indication there's going to be more breeze throughout the day, and the 3rd race could be really, really pumping.
So Azura kind of mid-fleet off the line. I mean, Jenny, there's kind of strategic option on the line. You compare it with Platoon. Platoon really gave themselves some space. Azura seemed to be more content to mix it up with whoever was round about them for that spot that they wanted. Fergal, you take that one up a little bit, perhaps? Just Azura's kind of positioning off the line. I mean, maybe they feel that, as you say, the breeze comes out of Bomb Alley a little bit of early right, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, it's been such a shifty race course throughout the entire week with this upper range of pressure that we've had, and we've seen early left pay and late right pay. I mean, certainly at the top, the right's always come in pretty good. With the breeze coming out of Bomb Alley. I think Azura, for them, it's probably just keeping the other boats in check. They don't want to go out to the right, and you've got to play the percentages in their position. That you've got to keep the guys who you need to beat in check, and they're probably looking under their boom, seeing where Platoon is, probably having a look and see where Sled is as well. They're pretty close, and I mean, for them to still be there means they've got a pretty clear lane.
Yeah, Sled seem to be doing pretty well off the start line once again in 2nd. Quantum well forward just now. I think that was probably one of their better starts of recent regattas. Fergal for Quantum did seem to be on the line with pace.
Yeah, Quantum have had a bit of a quiet regatta, quietly chipping away, and they're always there, more than thereabouts. They're always the benchmark boat for me over the last few years. They are the boat to beat. And they've had a bit of a quiet regatta this one, and we've been focusing a lot on Sled and Azura and Platoon, and because it's the end of the season. But maybe Quantum are going to go in all guns
blazing and pull off some 3 wins in the last day. Not impossible.
could be, and you know, it's not
no pressure on them whatsoever, and they have all the weapons in their armoury.
There's not a big gap between them and Platoon, actually. You know, we've talked about the race of first and second, and Quantum and Brunellasek third and fourth, but the smallest gap is actually between Platoon and Quantum. I think it's 6 points. So Quantum are well within reach of getting back to second.
Indeed, second overall. Sorry, second on the water just now. Gladiator seem to be going quite well out of that left side, Fergal.
Yeah, I think if this early left is paying, there might be a little bit more breeze where they're slightly bow forward. And yesterday we got an amazing start in this exactly the same position. We took a early tack and ended up having to dip the entire fleet. And to be on the chase boat, watching your boat dip every single boat, and
having had a good start, then that's painful, isn't it?
Yeah, there was basically a 50-foot gap between each boat, and you just couldn't quite make it through. So it was a big dip, straighten up, big dip. But luckily, the left really did come in, and the entire fleet ended up overstanding. Gladiator managed to come in pretty close, and from dipping the entire fleet, coming in fourth place was pretty good. I think from here it's a fairly similar story. They've just burnt out Brunellasek there, slowed them down, and hopefully trying to get up to Platoon as well. Gladiator is one of those boats, because we've missed a couple of events this season, who don't affect the overall result. So for us, this is all about getting back into the end of the regatta, and having a couple of good races towards the end. We got a fourth on the board yesterday, which was good for us, and we'll be looking.
Couple of places behind, a couple of points behind Allegri, so they would be your target for the day, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think our general strategy is we go out and we sail our racing as we want to. We don't particularly pick battles and try not to get into any matches.
Yeah.
And we just try and sail the boat fast in a straight line. We have the tools, and we know we can do it.
This right seems to be getting slightly stronger, as you said, Fergal, coming up this beat. We can see Azura were just ahead of Platoon. And Platoon there going across on port.
Yeah, I think Platoon kind of was starting to maybe feel a bit of pressure from
Azura to windward. Jenny, things looking slightly better for Azura from what we can see.
You know, it's interesting there. I think, Platoon was being affected by Gladiator. They had to tack out. They kind of went for it before Team Vision Future even was clear of them, and yet they lucked out. Team Vision Future tacked onto port at the same time, and they were let go. But it was unclear how they were going to end up lining up next to Azura, and I think the reality where they just were didn't look so great for Platoon. But actually now Azura's just let them off the hook. So Azura tacking out, giving Platoon the left, and Platoon tacking as well. I think this means what we've seen here is we've kind of hit this left-hand corner, like Fergal was just talking about, all the teams overstanding from the left yesterday, and I think they're being a bit more conservative about it today. Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, I think Azura were just looking at Gladiator coming across Fergal a little bit and just making their move early.
Yeah, I mean, in this scenario where you've got so many boats around you, it's a bit of a game of chess. You've got to think about what's going to happen in the
two moves ahead, really, isn't it?
And if you've got a boat coming in who's going to lee bow you, then you have to get tacked, and then you let your opposition go away. It's more about getting the clear air here, and I think they made a good move just getting out early. Platoon have to sit in a fairly tough spot with Sled, who are probably going to creep up to them. And if Gladiator and Quantum are overstood in any way, they're going to be coming down on top of them. I think Azura made quite a smart move there.
Just nice, keeping it safe, and
they've got a nice long, plenty of distance to come in on the starboard ley line. If they take it all the way to ley, they can go over a little bit and let other boats get caught up in being blocked out by other boats. We've seen so often in the first mark of each race how close the boats are together, and there's always one boat who doesn't quite lay, and it's on our boat we call it the blocker boat. They come in, they try and shoot the mark, the sails go, and then there's a big park up of waiting for that one boat to squeeze around the mark.
Sometimes that blocker boat's blue. No names, no pack drill, but gives you a couple of options there. But yes, it's interesting.
And this is also the place when in the first where we see the most penalties given away. Always coming in here, every boat coming in on port, you get the first boat coming across on starboard, and then it's how close can I tack to the boat who's coming on starboard and not get a penalty. Yeah. And the boat on starboard's thinking, how close can I get to them before forcing a penalty on them? We've got 3 jury boats on the water, they're right in amongst the action, and we've got the best in the world, so no one's getting away with pushing with anything. But we've seen Gladiator have had 2 of those penalties this week, just pushing it a little bit close to the boat coming in on starboard. And it's a massive penalty. The penalty is a huge penalty.
You go from
4 or 5 boat lengths instantly as soon as you get the penalty.
Yeah.
And then you have to avoid the other boats whilst you're doing it, and you can go from first to last in a heartbeat with a penalty at the top.
So Jen, the virtual shows Sled ahead, Quantum second, Gladiator third, Platoon and Azura so even. It's too hard to call. It's going to be all about, as Fergal said, the positioning, how far you go out to this ley line and where you end up in the final approach.
Yeah, and basically how big the left shift is at the top. I think we've seen it come through a little bit every day as they come in on port towards the top. It does go bend a little bit further left, but I was just thinking back to the start. I mean, the psychology of this race, of the very first race of the day, we were talking about how important it was for Azura and Platoon, and the 3 of us were discussing how Azura's maybe not putting themselves in the best spot, being to windward of Sled, the team to beat all week long, who's had such good boat speed and good decision making. But in some ways, rethinking that, I almost feel like that's them showing their confidence.
Yeah.
That's like, you know what, we can sit here, you've been the best team, and we're going to be able to hang. And I'm actually really impressed right now. They're to leeward, so sure, they're hanging fine. And right as I say this, I think Phoenix is actually working up on Azura a little bit. So maybe they'll be pig in the middle, and I'll be biting my words. But I do think that decision making to both position themselves there and then stick with it, because we saw it from about a minute and a half on that they were in that spot. They easily could have had plenty of time to tack out further up the line, etc. I think that shows there's a bit more confidence and maybe a bit less concern about pressure than possibly we had thought. Now, honestly, at this moment, this is a tough spot. They look like they're getting squeezed. Actually, it looks like Sled's just gone into bow down mode. It looks like Phoenix is sailing a little bit hot, and I think Azura, if they, yeah, exactly. This is my coach in college used to call it the criticism sandwich on the Atkins diet. They are the meat in the middle of 2 big pieces of bread, and they are definitely getting spat out the back. So this is going to be painful for Azura, because there is not much further, if any, tack out distance to that left ley line. So they'll ultimately have to sit in the batter of Sled, in the batter of Phoenix, and not be able to tack up to Platoon's line if they can't hold here. And while they might have had confidence on the start, I think this is really going to test their upwind boat speed and boat trim and helming ability, and the test looks like it's going the way of Sled and Phoenix.
Yeah, it's a shame for Azura to be in that spot. They look like they were doing good, but I don't know where Sled are getting this speed from, but they've had this incredible speed this week.
You don't know where it's coming from?
I don't know where it's coming from. I'd love to know. I'm going to ask. They've been really hot this week. In straight line speed, they've been the fastest boat, and that's not just because they've won the most races. It's quite clear on the water off the start line as soon as they get clear, and even downwind as well. They were absolutely launched yesterday as soon as they got around the top mark. They had no one to worry about, and in that position, the pressure is off you a little bit. You make all your manoeuvres right, and you can just sail away.
So what are the variables then that can be giving them that little edge?
I mean, it could, it's sail work. If they've been doing a lot of sail work and design between events, this is a completely different regatta to the one that we had in Portals. So it's not like you can take all the settings from Portals and say we were good there. Let's do it all again the same way. You've got to retrim your boat for this event. You're using sails that never even came out of the container here than we used in Portals. So there's a lot of work going into that, and I think the core group of Sled have sailed together and know each other very well. They've been together for a long time. The Robbie Naismith, Don Cowie, that group, and they've just been, like I said, I don't know what it is, but whatever they've done, definitely working in the big breeze.
So it's not something in the cornflakes, as Don Cowie was telling us yesterday, all about what they have for breakfast. But interestingly enough, then. Platoon, how do you evaluate their position there, Fergal?
Well, I mean, they're in a pretty good spot. They're going to have Gladiator and Quantum. We can just see there on that virtual ley line that Quantum and Gladiator are probably, very close. Quantum slightly over. Obviously, that ley line, I'm not sure if on the virtual the ley line shows you to the top mark or to the safety mark that we have. That means you can't come in close to the on the port ley line and tack right on the mark. We have a small safety mark that's about 50 meters downwind of the top mark. So these guys have got to come down and around that. And
that's what we saw. We've seen it a couple of times that they've actually, tracked down and come down to get round the safety mark.
Yeah, yesterday we saw it big. We saw almost the whole fleet, starting with Provetza. It was almost like they were dipping another boat. They had to come really far down, almost a boat length down at the end just to get around it. And then, I mean, you do get this nice slingshot of speed once you come back up right into up after it. You have another 4 boat lengths to the ley line. But I think Platoon are, obviously keeping their eye on Azura. They don't want to tack out for sure. If Gladiator and Quantum are putting the squeeze on them, Azura have nowhere to go. If Sled are putting the squeeze on them, I think they're just fine on Phoenix. You can just see them to lure to Phoenix.
Certainly
they're just good on there.
Quite well. I mean, it's Phoenix have got Tony Norris steering this week, as we mentioned a couple of times. Tina Plattner's back is still giving her trouble, and she decided to. I think she's on the chase boat, but Tony's steering this week. Has been doing a great job, but up against Guillermo in this situation.
If there's one guy you really don't want to go head to head with in a yacht race, if you're new on the helm, it's that guy. Guige is one of the best helmsmen in the fleet. He's been here forever, throughout the Med Cup and the Super Series, driving with the same guys.
Mm-hmm.
He is arguably the best guy steering a 52 on the water.
All right.
And for me anyway,
that's interesting.
He's won plenty, World Championships, seasons, regattas.
Just got 12th in the J70 Worlds, didn't they? 7th going into the last day. Had a little bit of a wobble in the last day, but 100 and something boat fleet.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're a quality team. But anyway, Jen, Sled doing what they did yesterday. White boat out in front.
I think the Wheaties or the cornflakes or whatever it is on board Sled is powering them to some massive victories here. And as we said, a well-deserved win if they take it in this regatta, as it'll be their first win ever for a regatta in the Super Series. But can you imagine just winning by this many races in a row as well near the end? It's spectacular. But Quantum Racing just came out of what could have been a really badly overstood lane, and instead they were able to use some pretty decent speed to roll over the top of Platoon and Gladiator and to put themselves in second. And I think here the big question for Azura is whether they're going to be able to pull off, and it looks like they have the distance to pull off the tack in front of Platoon. But yeah, for a while there it was looking sketchy, and I was thinking, oh, all right, if you're Platoon, you just go bow down and you try to initiate some sort of force them to tack early and get a penalty call. But no, Azura's well clear. In fact, as they go for the tack here, they're easily ahead of the 3 boats behind. So no harm, no foul, and that's it. Sled around in front, Quantum Racing into second. And yeah, Fergal saying earlier, we haven't spent a lot of time with them, but they've had a great week, and they're clearly fighting hard for the podium. They're on the podium already, but maybe even fighting hard for second place with just 5 points to Azura behind them. And then Gladiator just sneaking in there actually inside of Azura. Hadn't quite picked that for happening, but well done to Gladiator. Again, coming out of that left a little bit overstood, but just able to just crack off and just get inside of Platoon. A nice set for Sled, and I think again we'll probably see the same as yesterday, straight sets at the moment. This left side relatively favored, and then the game is a bit further down the course. And unfortunately yesterday we saw some major plays on the downwinds, but that was during the day when it was lighter and still a bit shiftier, and today it is much windier, and it's more about just trying to close the gaps and sail fast and sail forward into your competitors so that you can then have a bit more play on the next upwind. And I think that's really what Platoon's going to be trying to do. Fergal, they're going to be trying to get over your team here and then kind of just putting the pressure on Azura. But at this point, for the Germans, they needed to have a big, bold first race, and I think this is not what they'd want to be seeing.
I think what I said on the start line, Platoon love this big breeze, and they're gonna be right on the hammer of Gladiator here, trying to take a scalp there, and Gladiator are going to be putting the pressure on Azura a little bit here, but we'll probably see as we get down into the left-hand corner, it might go a little lighter. We saw that yesterday. If you got right out to the ley line on the right-hand side as you look downwind, it got a little lighter in that corner, so we didn't see people going right into the ley line. You see Azura, I don't know if they're setting up to jibe or they're just getting a bit of weight back there, but we might see a few symmetrical drives going on here, trying to cover the guy in the front and look to get the roll on them. Certainly I think Platoon would try and do that to Gladiator, or if Gladiator jibe off early, they just go after Azura and try and keep the pressure on them.
But interestingly, of course, Gladiator not scoring in the championship, but playing an interesting role in this battle just now between Azura and Platoon that can affect both boats in different ways at different times.
Yeah, they can either you know, essentially help.
Who do they want to win?
Or I don't know. I really don't know. There is a good Isle of Wight connection on Platoon with Jules Salter, the navigator.
Yeah.
If that was any sort of connection, we've sailed with a lot of the guys from Platoon. They've been past sailors on Gladiator, Ross Halcrow, Dirk de Ridder, Jules.
Yeah. They all learnt their trade in the Gladiator, didn't they?
But we're long-term friends of Azura. We share the same yard of them. As we've been kind of alongside them for the last 10 years. So I wouldn't say there was a favourite. We certainly won't be helping anyone out, that's for sure. We'll be aiming for the front.
Tell me, just while we've got a moment, so you've got Ian Percy on board. Ian sailed with you quite a lot over the last 18 months or so, has he?
Yes, yeah. He started with us in Valencia last year, did the last regatta in Valencia with us last year. And he's done a bit with us in America, a bit with us in England this year. Him and Tony get on very well. I mean, Ian's a brilliant bloke. I grew up with him handing out our prizes at the Oppie Championships when he was winning gold medals and fins and stars. But he's brilliant on board the boat. He keeps quite a calm manner on board.
He looks after Tony.
He does look after Tony, and they all look after each other.
Azura appear to have caught up to Quantum just a little bit, Jenny, perhaps?
Yeah, Azura's got great speed at the moment. I think maybe Quantum just going a bit slower because it also looks like Sled's put the jets on. So Azura, of course, just trying to get every single scoring point on the overall series, as you were explaining. Gladiator not a scoring point because they skipped 2 races this year. Gladiator just jibing out. So maybe, as Fergal says, they're not giving anyone their quarter, but they're also maybe just not wanting to be involved in that fight either. And I think probably about the right time. I was just taking a look around, and it looks like it's gotten lighter. Now, it might just be that we've come into this left corner, like Fergal was explaining. It's not so amazing well out here on the left-hand side of the race course, right side looking downwind. So I think ultimately their jibe early might be a good move. The only other team that's done that is Brunello, who were well deep, jibed well early. And we saw in previous regattas, Brunello had really good speed on the downwinds. They haven't quite been able to capitalize here. I think, as you were explaining, Andy, they've just had a couple top mark incidents where they've been the blocker or been the boat not laying the mark, and we haven't seen them. No, we weren't talking about a blue boat, the only blue boat in the fleet. But I think, unfortunately, because they really wanted to fight for the series podium as well. They were sitting a close fourth to Quantum Racing earlier, and now they're a 10-point back fourth. So actually, they still technically could fight for it in the next 2 races. But at the moment, Quantum just putting a bit more points. Meanwhile, that Sled and Azura and Platoon all folded here, all onto the other jibe. Quantum continuing a bit further into this corner, but looking to go for their jibe now as well. So it's difficult in this breeze. It is not easy to put big moves on the downwinds. It's just about the little subtleties that can bring you into that position where when you're then jibing the final jibe for the bottom marks, then you've got the ability to actually make some moves and to pick your side and to maybe get that extra foot. That means that you're on the inside instead of not. But that's what all these teams are setting up for here. And actually, Azura looks properly speedy out of that jibe, like they might have some wheels over at least Quantum Racing at the moment.
Interesting, yeah. And Gladiator have made some gains out in that left side, perhaps, Fergal?
Yeah, possibly. We saw it yesterday. We ended up having to jibe out. There was a couple of boats with a bit more pace after the hoist yesterday, and we ended up getting forced to jibe out. And when we jibe back onto starboard, kind of where we are now, got a bit of a header and actually came back in slightly further in front. And maybe there's a little bit more pressure just on that left-hand side as you look down the racetrack, which might help out. I mean, Brunello come back in with some good breeze, but still not too light over here. Probably not as light as we expected it to be, but at the beginning of the run, I think the boats were doing 15 knots, 16 knots, and now down to around 13, 12, maybe just on this side. But I think coming down here, we're probably just over halfway down the run, and I think this is where that kind of game of chess comes back into it. Like, we've got 2 marks to go around.
Yeah.
And
If you're thinking about the beat.
yeah, who's, you know, where a sled probably going to go around this mark, where a quantum set up for someone like Azura, who are you going to follow around, or who do you want to kind of bounce off to the other mark, which is your favourite mark?
Go on.
That kind of thing. And
Any thoughts on the
good question.
Azura strategy?
I mean, at the moment, I would say you would ideally maybe round the right-hand mark and then protect with an early tack, because I think realistically this left corner and this ability for the fleet to kind of get a little too far out left and then overstand has been so constant this week. You'd almost think that they would stop doing it, but it's happened every race. It happened the last upwind, and I just feel like if you can round the right mark looking upwind and then tack early, then you're protecting towards the left without being so involved in that being pinned on the left side and fighting too hard over the left-hand ley line.
Just looking at Santi Lange gesticulating at the back of the Azura. What's he concerned about, do you think?
well, I think he's fully in this game of chess. He's looking around. He'll be talking to Bruno, the navigator, about the splits to each mark. You know, how long on this jibe and how long on the other to each mark. Which is the most favoured mark for us to go to? Thinking about which mark sled's probably going to go to. Who's behind us? When can we jibe? There's so much stuff going through that guy's head right now, and you know, kind of leaving the team to sail the boat fast, and them just follow the orders when he says, you know, this is the time to go. This is the mark we're going to go around. Yeah. We're going to do a windward drop. We're going to do a jibe drop. I think the jibe drop is probably the faster of the drops, where we come in on starboard as you see sled, then go round that right mark as you look upwind. You jibe onto it. The kite kind of falls down the jib with the drop line system we have. I think that's the fastest manoeuvre, but you do an extra jibe, and then you also do an extra tack once you go around that mark.
Well, here's a good one, gentlemen. It looks like Quantum Racing possibly is going to get the inside of sled here. So that, no, maybe not. Sled kind of gave them a little room. They would have had the ability, but they don't have the speed. So it was looking close. But I think major gains there for Quantum just in that last little bit. Now they're only 1 boat length behind what was 3 boat lengths earlier. And at least it looks at the moment here, sled going for the left mark, Quantum going for the left mark. I also think the left mark may be a tiny bit further upwind than the right mark on the far side. So it might be everyone wanting to come around this side. Azura as well looks like they're lining up for the left side behind Quantum here. A bit of a gain here for Quantum to Azura. So really nice for them to hold out into that corner just that extra bit longer.
And corresponding a little bit of a loss to Gladiator, unfortunately. It just means now that I think that Azura should have platoon directly behind them.
Yeah, I think that extra couple of manoeuvres that Gladiator had to do, I think they've done 2 more jibes than all these guys. Platoon and Gazprom all coming in here. They've done a couple more manoeuvres. It looks like they're going to be forced over to that side, which certainly from this perspective we have here looks the less favoured of the 2 marks. The left mark looks slightly further upwind, as Jenny said. But if you like that right-hand side of the course, go out for 100 metres and tack back over this kind of loose cover. We'll see. I mean, there's a lot of boats going round one mark and only 1 boat going round, or maybe Provetza as well. But all the traffic, all the bad air is over on the left-hand side. Yeah. So there could be gains to be made on the right-hand side there.
They're looking good just now for Azura, Jenny.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're probably comfortable where they are. Quantum just tacked off, so Quantum a little bit in the bad air of sled has let Azura free, and Azura seems just to have a high enough lane to windward that they won't have to worry about sled, and they're probably just going to be eyes out to platoon behind them. Now, the question for Azura will be if platoon tacks, would they then tack and then have to duck Quantum Racing if they've made any gains, or would they actually just still be behind Quantum? Because that's kind of, you don't want to actually be forcing yourself slower, and here goes platoon, I think, for the tack. So here's where we'll see what Azura's decision is and whether they're doing the loose cover or not. And it looks like no one's even moving on board Azura. So Azura confident in their decision making and confident in the left-hand side, it seems like, and happy to let platoon play their own game. And fair enough for them. They're not quite out on that port ley line yet, and they don't want to be dictated by Quantum once they get out there. So at some point they will need to start to think about it, especially as the sleds just come into the game hammering Quantum. So yeah, it might be a little three-boat battle here for the top three, and Quantum's gone back. So Azura's just got to stay out of that battle of the two boats in front of them, clean on Platoon, and it's probably going to be pretty easy to do for them.
So once again, if you've got any questions, do post them on our social media channels, and we'll try and put them to our experts. We had a couple of interesting ones yesterday. But Sled, this would be their fourth race win, their third in a row. Extend their margin at the top of the table, and you'd imagine moving ever closer to a regatta win.
Yeah, they're just firing on all cylinders, Sled. It's actually quite amazing to watch. I don't know when the last boat scored 3 bullets in a row.
I think they did. I think they have before, but then they still didn't win the regatta, from what I remember.
Well, maybe if it was
2-1-1, I can't remember exactly, but they had a very strong sequence at some point, and then the wheels fell off the next day, as so often happens. But really got the bit between their teeth just now.
It certainly doesn't look like anything's falling off today. They're just going. They're just sailing smart, sailing clean.
And I mean, no, not telling tales out of school, but they were going off the dock and they had a problem immediately, and that's the kind of thing that can unsettle you when you've been having 2 wins and everything's going great. Just hooked a line, and it took them a few moments to get sorted out, but just can unsettle you, Fergal, a little bit, can't you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's very tricky to get out of some of the docks that we go to. We have 2 ground lines down. If one of them hasn't quite sunk properly and you're leaving the dock, you might be able to pick it up.
Especially with breeze on, yeah.
Yeah, and it's we've had plenty of breeze in the marina, and you go out and there's not a big space to turn in, but I wouldn't put that down to nerves. So I think that's a pretty unfortunate thing. But certainly
something that when you've got your process in place, we're going off the dock at this time, we're going to do this, and you lose 2 or 3 minutes because you.
Yeah, it does shake up your schedule a little bit, but
yeah.
I don't think it affected them too much, and they're ripping. And I think for the boats like Azura, once this it will only be an extra point put in this regatta, but
an extra point with 2 races to go.
Yeah, and I think
take that.
I think the focus might shift away from this regatta a little bit, maybe for Azura, and think more about the overalls and just protecting that overall.
Yeah.
Just saying, you know what, Sled have just got another win. Let's go for the overall. I'm sure they'll never take their eyes off of any prize, but maybe the higher percentage of the focus will go on Platoon rather than Sled.
Indeed. Jenny, what are your thoughts? And breeze seems to be holding up very nicely. Absolutely champagne conditions for this final Super Saturday of the season.
Prosecco conditions,
yeah,
Andy.
Prosecco
conditions. We're in Italy.
You're my wine expert, Jenny.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about the top level Prosecco, the DOCG. The weird thing is the fleet has finally decided to use the whole of the race course. So for once, we're not really coming so far into this left-hand corner. We're using a little bit more the middle right, the bottom right, and I think possibly we saw it just got lighter on the downwind on that left-hand side, and maybe there's a bit of a left shift early enough that they're happy to be on port a little bit sooner. But as you can tell, they're really not coming into this, or they just heard me from my frustration from earlier saying that they've just all come to the port lay line too early and overstood, and it's not the caliber of sailing you'd expect from these guys. But yeah, much different approach to the race course here, at least not playing quite to the port lay line the way that they were. And perhaps that's just the puzzle of covering each other, and of the top 4, the top 5 teams sort of playing the game of, Sled had to hit Quantum and Quantum had to tack out, so then Sled sort of tacked to cover, and the same with Azura hitting Platoon and Platoon tacking out, and Azura tacked to cover, and suddenly you're heading on port tack earlier than you maybe would have later on. But I think it's kind of nice to see, because it means it opens up the race course for more of this upwind. We'll see more positioning and jockeying for position later, whereas previously we were just seeing boats overstood, and kind of the only jockeying position is rounding up at that safety mark at the top. So it does open it up a little bit, and yet I think for Platoon, they're in this long drag race on port with Azura, and they haven't really seemed to be as fast or not using their speed to their best advantage. Is there maybe, Andy, is there a boat underneath Platoon that I can't quite see to my eye, but actually that you can see on virtual? Right, okay, yeah. So just starting to see them peek out now, the blue sail. But yeah, so Bernardesek maybe just, even if they're not close enough to be affecting them, it's the kind of having someone niggling to leeward of you that bothers the driver sometimes. That might just be meaning they're not, well, you know, I'm sure Harm's a fabulous driver, but not sailing to their utmost, and they definitely don't want to attack again and have a Zura attack on them. But I think reality is, as you guys said, we haven't come into a single final day with the team with a 10-point lead, I think, in this entire season or series. And granted, it's a 9-point lead for sled, but this is a spectacular showing for that team. And if they can then seal it with a bullet to win the day now, just like they started the regatta with a bullet, they had 2 yesterday, they are so on fire, and the game is just behind them.
I think one of the most impressive things that maybe people at home don't know too much is that this is only our 3rd day of racing out of 5. We've had to miss 2 days due to Mistral conditions. So sled have gone into this last day with a 9-point lead only in 2 days. So normally we would have had 8 races done by now, and there's still not that much of a big lead. So to do it in 6 races just shows how good a regatta they're having. And this race now, they're going to go into the next race. Fingers crossed for them that they continue their form, and they're going to go into the next race with a 10-point lead. And you know, imagine how buoyed you'd be by that. You know, I couldn't think of a better boat to be on in terms of spirit going into the last 2 races with a 10-point lead.
And it's great to have different boats winning regattas over the course of the season. It said yesterday, it really does keep not just that team motivated, but there's that philosophy that if sled can do it, you know, we've got the tools, we can do it next season, and that applies to probably 5 or 6 boats through the fleet, you know, and also for the, you know, same as Provezza. Provezza won this year. Provezza won for the first time a couple of years ago in Mallorca. You know, and that's really what keeps some of the owners motivated, always thinking that the regatta win is within reach.
Yeah, I think years ago at the start of this, it was the Quantum Azura show.
That's
and
right.
It still is, but it shows the fleet's catching up.
Definitely.
And I definitely think that Platoon is the cat amongst the pigeons there. They're the ones who have always been breaking up that show. You know, since Ran left a couple of years ago, who took regatta wins and world championship titles. I think they won the worlds in Miami in a few years ago, and you know, Platoon have now won 2 world championships. They're the new, you know, it's not just a 2-horse race anymore. It's a 3, and now sled are doing this. It's now a 4.
Yeah.
And everyone's catching up.
And Provezza, I think, as well, for a goal, because they had a tough year, but they had some major fire earlier.
Yeah, and Provezza were you know, I would have them as championship contenders until the mask came down. You know, within 1 or 2 bogey results over the course of their early season, but they won the second event of the season in Porto Cervo, and they were extremely quick all round, especially quick in the lighter conditions.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean,
you know, when you look to the future, you know, there's no saying it's certainly no longer, as you say, the Azura Quantum Racing show.
Yeah.
Everybody really has caught up. And as Guy was telling us yesterday, I think we're talking about doing some training in December in Valencia. You know, the level's going to keep inching up, but it will remain universal, kind of through the top of the fleet.
Yeah, we've only got a short gap before we have to go to before we go down to South Africa, and you know, we kind of need to put these training events on to keep us fresh, and to go into the next season. You know, we used to do almost 6 months off before going into the next event, which would normally be Palma Vela in April or May, and finishing at the end of September. So just to break that winter up, and you know, we're doing our winter modifications on the boat and making sure they're all still up to speed, and you know, whatever the sail designers want to do. This is, I think, the training session is very much a sail designer driven thing. They want to, you know, look at what the sail setup wants to be for South Africa. It's going to be a very ranging,
broad range regatta.
Yeah, well, the conditions, I think, for the whole of the season next year, you have 2 potentially very windy events in South Africa, then going to Scarlino in June,
Light
July.
series, light,
yeah.
Jenny, Prenenasek seem to have got themselves back into this race progressively, considering, I think, top mark, first time up, they were back of the fleet pretty much. They seem to be able to do that, yeah.
That's the interesting part about that right mark on the downwind. Sorry, the right mark looking upwind and rounding it. We saw yesterday a couple teams come out of that corner and they just get righties early and are able to hold off against the fleet. And I think, unfortunately for Gladiator, they went around that way, but they didn't maybe take advantage of it in the way that Prenenasek has. And yet we didn't even talk about them being a contender for the series, but they're the ones sitting fourth overall in the series and a bit fighting Quantum for the podium position. So I think another team to keep an eye out for
the future.
Well, definitely in this regatta. We know that in the future they're going to have to be replacing their helmsman as Chimay goes back to the Olympic sailing next year. But yeah, I think they've been doing a really good job this year. They just don't, sometimes the wheels fall off a little bit with them. In maybe the way that sometimes Platoon's wheels fall off just a little bit, but Prenenasek, it tends to happen a touch more often, and maybe that's the fiery youth of Chimay driving a boat that's not nearly as responsive as, say, a 470 or the 49er that he won the World Championships in, and he's just got to learn the class and learn the fleet a bit more and learn the start line and the top marks just a little bit more because the maneuvering is just that much harder.
Indeed, we're looking at sled coming upwind, second top mark. First race of the day, last day of the season. Sled closing ever closer, you'd imagine, to their first regatta title.
Yeah, they got one more leg just to put before putting another 2 points back to Azure on this regatta. It's certainly not over. It's a 2 mile downwind, so a 10-minute run. So they've still got a bit to do, and looks like they're just under lay there. Got to squeeze up to the mark a little bit, but
yeah. Sorry, go on.
No, they'll certainly be happy with their position, being able to look back, looking forward, and not seeing any boats in front. There'll be a good mood on that boat for sure after this.
Jenny, we've spoken a few times about the influence of Murray Jones in this boat. You know him very well. What's he bring to this team?
You know, the thing I love about Murray is no matter how stressed exactly. Literally, no matter how stressed the situation is, his tone and his demeanor are identical. And that's the kind of thing that matters. If you've had an awesome race, you still need to be as calm.
He's the most Kiwi of Kiwis,
race.
Isn't he?
Yeah. I was just trying to think about, what are Kiwi celebrations? And the thing is, you can't really think about Kiwi celebrations because they don't celebrate. And so I think he is actually the epitome of that. We won't see them really celebrate when they cross the line now. They'll do a pretty demure handshake on board, but that's something that he and probably Kiwis in general do bring to sailing teams, and I think Murray just epitomizes it. He's got that calm tone, that calm demeanor on board, and when you have someone helping call tactics, it's a pretty special dynamic. And of course, they're all really good. I mean, I went through the number of America's Cup sailers they had on board sled yesterday, and it must be 11 of the 14 guys or 10 of the 14 guys have all sailed almost multiple cups. So, and the reality is the majority of those are Kiwis. So they've kind of got this really great mix of Kiwi, Japanese guys on board, and Murray's he's just leading by example, I think. So anyway, that sled just strutting off to what will be their 4th race win in this regatta. Behind them, Quantum Racing just lost a touch of. They were more in touch with sled earlier. Now they're probably 7-10 boat lengths back. But Azura hasn't really made major gains on Quantum. Only about 2 boat length and a half behind Quantum Racing. And again, there is the possibilities for change of position on the downwind, but it's much harder in this sort of breeze. I think probably now we're 16 knots maybe up at the top of the course, and as you can see down near the bottom of the course, still a lot more breeze, but we're just at the top. We're so protected by land that it makes the sets quite easy, makes the teams, gives them a little time to kind of get adjusted to sailing downwind in the medium breeze before it gets heavier. And then just out the back, Platoon 5 boat lengths back from Azura, not the quickest set on board Platoon there. Took them a little while to trim the kite. And Prenenasek, as you guys said, up into 5th. So Prenenasek still trying to put a little bit of a battle on.
Prenenasek not out of touch with Platoon. They could do something for him there, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. They could play the game downwind. We know that, Platoon's fast as well downwind. But in the overall series, they could move forward too. They've got only 2 points on behind Provetsa. and only 3 points behind Phoenix. So I think realistically this could see Brunello move up to at least 5th place, and then it's Platoon in front of them. But this will be the good start of the day for Brunello. I think this regatta, we haven't really seen them fighting at the front as much as they would like, and I think they'd rather have an early move forward through the fleet, and then that'll bode well for the rest of the day.
So a quick projection, projected points table. If position stayed the same through the finish line, Azura would lead the circuit by 13 points. Is it, Fergal? You're the maths expert.
12 points if they go through.
Yeah.
And then still only 4 points from Platoon back to Quantum. Quantum putting a couple of points on Platoon here.
Yeah.
So closing the gap, and now almost the race is now Quantum Platoon more than Azura Platoon. And then 13 points back to Brunello. Brunello have, were kind of almost out of it at the top mark of the first leg.
Yeah, they were 10th.
They were right down the back, and they've fought their way back to 5th. So they've 2 more races to go. Everything's still possible. That top 4, I think Azura are clear of the podium. I think they're happily on the podium, but obviously it's the win they're after. And just to put that extra cushion in there, another nice point over Platoon. They'll be smiling for sure. I think Jenny made a really good point on that bottom mark. He saw that Gladiator and I think Brunello were the only 2 guys who went right.
Yeah.
And Brunello really capitalised on just got that clear air and making a few less manoeuvres coming up. And I think Gladiator got bounced in amongst Provetza and the Phoenix.
Yeah.
Eventually Gazprom as well. It just shows, if you keep manoeuvres down this boat, these boats are so fast in a straight line. As soon as you start doing a few manoeuvres,
you're losing distance.
Yeah.
So Jenny, we've just seen Azura jibing.
Yeah, I think it's just
Matching Platoon,
protection against.
matching
exactly. Platoon and Brunello behind them. At this point, Azura's happy to let the leaders lead and to just make sure that they're sealing the deal as much as they can out the back. And I think, honestly, I do think the jibe early is probably a good move. I think there is slightly more breeze still offshore that isn't quite coming into this bottom corner here. So I think we could see gains for Brunello when they come back from that, having been the first one to jibe out. But the shift's hard to tell shift-wise. It really feels light as we come down the course on this left side, and it looks better far out there where Brunello is.
You've just seen Brunello jibe coming in at a nice angle, Fergal.
Yeah, and that was about as good a jibe as you can possibly do in a 52. The kite was
full all the way around.
Full all the way around. It just did that little flick as the sheets crossed over, and as soon as everyone was back onto the windward side, the kite was full, and they were like full speed on. I don't think if you want to see a perfect jibe, rewind and watch that again. Only criticism, they get hallied up a little bit.
They do that a lot. I don't know why. They had it on day 1 when I was out. They still had 10 centimetres at the top of the kite that somebody's obviously marked the kite wrong, the kite halyard wrong. But they certainly have closed up a little bit on Platoon.
I'm not sure as well if you guys will have caught that by eye, but right as you were talking about how good a jibe Brunello had, Sled had about the worst jibe we've seen of anyone in the fleet all week long. So just didn't get their kite full for ages, and I think has actually put them almost in danger of getting rolled by Quantum Racing here. So a really interesting mistake, and I couldn't really, we just caught it because we're staying over at Brunello on the far side, but we couldn't quite see what actually went wrong. Like I would think it would have been a sheet problem or something, because it was a long delay before the kite got filled and drawing again, and I think has put Quantum well in their sights.
I know they had a little electrical problem with their system, Fergal, before they were going off the dock. They had the electricians working on board for quite a while, affecting their systems, and they made a little bit of a change. And maybe there's a little mechanical problem in that jibe, possibly.
It's so easy that we've scaled down over the development of these boats over the last 10 years. We've seen everything get smaller, including the ropes, and you get the kite sheets on these boats are only 7mm in diameter, and the chance of them knotting up if there's a little dry patch or that it's been round something on the floor, it's so easy to get a little Herbert in the sheet and just stop it, and it just causes all sorts of havoc. And that's the last thing you need when you've got a calm demeanour on board the boat. It's just that little bit of havoc breaking out. I think they're a long way to leeward of Quantum. They shouldn't be getting affected by them too much, but it's those little things you don't need.
I like that, Fergal. Herbert. I think I've heard a line, not in a line called many things, but usually they start with A and not with H. So that's a good one. I'm going to take that forward.
Oh, that was thanks to, I heard that first with Knocker, Anthony Nossiter. He told me I had a Herbert in the sheet once. It took me ages to figure out what I was doing wrong.
Just say A Herbert or a something Herbert. But anyway, extremely close now between Quantum and Sled, pretty much bow to bow, I think. Very little in it coming into this finish line. And as Fergal rightly pointed out, Quantum going forward a little bit in terms of points on Platoon. This may still be good for Quantum and bad for Platoon in the big picture.
Well, with two races, or potentially two races
6
left
points between them going onto the water in the overall.
Yeah, with Azura in between, cuts down to 4, and all you need is a penalty on the start, a bad start, a bad jibe, as we've seen. It can cost you meters, and in this fleet, meters really count. I think the lead has just dropped from 40 meters to 12 meters in one jibe, so it's certainly not over. And six points is doable in one race, so 2 races, it's still all on for them.
It's going to be fun to see this chess game line up here towards the finish line. I mean, there goes Quantum initiating the moves with their first jibe. Actually, it looks like Sled has maybe a better lead than we would have expected. So Sled's going to be able to cross and jibe into what we call the power position, that position to leeward and forward. And if they don't mess up this jibe, if they're not having an electrical problem, then they should be able to retain this lead into the finish. And that was a pretty nice jibe there, as you can see, kite full and drawing. And I think just accelerate just a touch here, Mr. Akura, bow up to get up to some speed so Quantum doesn't get into them. Yeah, and then reality is they come down towards the finish. The hard part is the boat end is favored. So for them, if the pin was favored, they could just stay bow high and just aim for the pin. But the boat's got almost a boat length of a smaller boat, or half a boat length of 52 size boat advantage. So then the bearing away is an important one. But yeah, this will be Sled taking their 4th win of this regatta, Andy, and going well forward on the leaderboard overall.
Pretty well deserved win for Sled there, straight off the line.
4 wins from 7 starts. That's pretty good going.
Yeah, kept their cool all the way through the race. Kept it minimal manoeuvres, very simple. You have a boat like Quantum breathing down your neck on the last run. You've just got to keep it cool, and they just managed to do it. And I mean, it's never over, but 2 races to go with a 10-point lead. They're going to be hard to beat. They've just got to keep it simple.
And then behind them, I think Quantum Racing with a second place, a good job for them to stay on the podium, and maybe even just adding 1 more point to Azura, who was second on the podium beforehand and is still going to maintain second there. Then Azura crossing the line in 3rd. Platoon with a decent comeback here into 4th place. And Bredinisek with the best comeback of all of the fleet, catching up from almost last to 5th position. Unfortunately, I think for Gladiator and the Phoenix, who were higher up at points in the race, they've both dropped down a little bit. It's Phoenix coming soon into 6th place, crossing the line in 6th, holding off a very tight battle of 4 boats behind them. But as Andy was explaining earlier, Tina is sitting this one out on the chase boat at the moment. Tony Norris driving the boat across the line here, and Phoenix is sitting in 5th position overall, and I think will maintain that 5th overall, with Provezza still behind them. So they were very close coming into the racing this morning, just 1 point between them. But now Provezza crossing the line behind them. And then a bit of a battle on here for Allegre to try to, as Provezza's going to cross, Allegre is just getting rolled out of their jibe by Team Vision Future. So maybe, Andy, maybe they could get into the mix. But I think, no, Allegre's just filled their kite just in time and should cross the line then in 8th place. Team Vision Future pulling up from not the best first up win to take 9th, and didn't quite see where Gladiator went wrong there. At points they were in contention for the top 5, but crossing now into 10th place across the line. So race 1, an impressive race for Sled. Again, an impressive day for both Sled and Azura to kind of be stamping what they want on the day.
Data, they were good early on.
Yeah, tough race. We don't know what's going on. I'm sure we'll find out in the debrief tonight. But it's just one of those fleets where you can go from hero to zero pretty easy.
Indeed. Anyway, let's have a look at the replay. How this race number 7. First, we think of 3 today. Let's have a look back at the replay with James.
Well, race 7, lucky number 7. What a fantastic race it was. All eyes were on Azura as they lined up for the start, and as we go down, we're inside 10 seconds here. You can see a nice bit of space between the boats, and as the gun goes, just going to slow it down. You can see a fairly even start. Gladiator doing a great job at the pin, but as we looked up the line, it was Quantum starting to edge out a little bit early on in that leg, doing a great job of getting the bows clear. But as we tacked over, a very, very familiar sight of bow number 5 Sled edging out once again into the lead, and they really did not lose any ground from here. As we got to the top mark, Sled rounds first with Quantum not too far behind, doing a great job of getting to that stretch mark now and really starting to put meters on these boats behind them. You can see Azura just behind in 3rd, and also bow number 2 Platoon wasn't too far behind at that point. Down onto the run after the first jibe, you can see Sled now starting to edge out. Quantum held their jibe a little bit longer, and we're trying to come up underneath the fleet. You can see there from the drone shot, really started to hot the angle up, and they weren't too far behind Sled at this point, really closing in. Nice little battle. Sled rounding in first with Quantum just behind them, following around that left mark. Azura in 3rd, and then a bit of a split there. You can see, I'm just going to slow it down a little bit here. Unfortunately for Phoenix 11, you can see them getting boxed out of that mark. And this is where Brunellisek really started to put some places on. I think she made up those 2 places as we made our way up onto the second beat. Sled really stretching their lead, but Azura now starting to cover Platoon and keeping an eye on that overall prize. Quantum locked in a nice little battle here, also with Azura. Azura trying to tack away and clear her air. But on the final upwind beat at the top mark, it was all Sled out in her own patch of water and sailing extremely fast. As we've seen throughout this regatta, you can see just behind there, Quantum were ahead of Azura as they got round and onto the downwind leg. Azura not too far behind Quantum at this point here. We thought it might be a bit of a closer battle. And you can see Platoon getting caught up by Brunellisek. Brunellisek jibing off to the left. And as they came back together, very, very close. This was actually after that bad jibe that Jenny said about Sled. They had a very, very poor jibe. And at this point here, they'd given away a lot of their lead. Quantum just starting to edge forward on this final leg. But as they came back together, a little bit closer than Sled would have liked. But as they went through, they're going to take their 3rd win in a row. Out here, Quantum in 2nd. And of course, Azura with a very, very valuable 3rd place, which puts them even further ahead of Platoon on those overall standings, Andy.
Virgil, interesting race, but Azura moving, you'd think, ever closer to the title?
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice to get another little cushion on Platoon and Quantum now. You know, Quantum getting a point back as well, but they've put some points on everyone, and you know, still 2 races to go. It's still not over. They've still got plenty of work to do in the next 2 races.
Let's have a look at the standings then. Hopefully things, as I said, getting better every moment for Sled. Sled now on 14 points, 11 points clear of Azura. Azura 25, Quantum Racing 29, so 4 points between them. Platoon in fourth on 32, Phoenix 11, 37. Brunellasek 39, Preveza also on 39, then a big gap back to Allegra 51, 55 for Gladiator, and Team Vision Future on 65. But there's the story of the day really. Azura now on 157 points, Platoon on 169, so 12 points of difference. Quantum Racing 173, so just 4 points between them. Quantum getting a little bit closer to Platoon. It's not over, as Virgil keeps saying, for between Platoon and Quantum Racing for second. Brunellasek a little bit further back on 186. Preveza 197. Sled 216. Allegra 221 and Phoenix 11 on 238. So that's the standings going into the penultimate race of the 52 Super Series 2019 here in Porto Cervo. We're going to take a little bit of a break. Join us again in a few minutes when we go into the second race of the day. Welcome back to Porto Cervo. We've had a fantastic first race. We're expecting 3 today. Conditions very slightly lighter, but Azura going well. Sled on the verge of their first regatta title, Fergal.
Yeah, I think both boats did exactly what they needed to do. Platoon put the cushion on, Azura put the cushion on Platoon, Sled put the cushion on the Fleet, and they're both looking forward to a couple of respective wins, hopefully.
You still fancy Quantum Racing for catching Platoon in the second step in the podium?
You can never write them off from anywhere. You know, if they have a bad start, if something goes wrong, you can never write them off. They're 4 points behind Platoon. They're arguably the favourite TP52 over the years.
And I think Doug getting better with every race, really, isn't he? I mean, it's a hard ask for him to come into Porto Portals, the World Championship, and step into the hot seat steering the boat. He's now really starting to find his mojo, I think, and getting better all the time. Yeah,
it takes a bit of time to get used to these boats in different conditions. We're seeing completely different conditions here to what he had in Portals. So all the practice there is kind of avoided for this event. So he's now on the last day. Got straight back into the hot seat in this on that last race and pulled off a second, very close to taking Sled's third win in a row. And I think all cylinders will be firing on that boat now. They'll be looking forward to closing that gap.
Let's have a quick look at the standings then. The regatta standings here in Porto Cervo. The Audi 52 Super Series Sailing Week, Porto Cervo. Our final regatta of 5 this season. First place is Sled, 11 points up on Azura and 25 points. Quantum Racing and 29. Platoon 32. Phoenix 11, 37, 39 for Berenasek, Pravetsa 39, Allegra 51, Gladiator 55 and Team Vision Future 65. And this story for Azura, as we say, looking really good in the circuit standings, with our lead now 157 versus 169, so 12 points for Azura over Platoon. And as Fergal said, 4 points between Platoon and Quantum Racing. That's very tenable over 2 races. Quantum Racing in third, Berenasek a little bit further back after that finish there for them, 186 points. The podium slipping away from the Russian team, the brand new boat this season. Pravetsa solid in fifth, 197 points. Sled 216. Allegra 221 and Phoenix 11 238. So Fergal, take us behind the scenes, take us on each of the top 3 boats. What are they all thinking? What are Sled thinking? They just keep going.
Sled have just got to keep doing what they're doing. They're not in contention for the overall. They don't need to get embroiled in the battle between Azura and Quantum and Platoon. They can go out, sail the same regatta as they have done these last couple of days, certainly the last 3 races they've done. Azura, bit more on. Going into today, they were a lot closer together with Platoon, and Quantum were a little bit closer with Berenasek. That top 3 have now all kind of closed up.
You'd imagine they will just do the same as they did in the previous race, which is just kind of sail their own race, keep an eye on Platoon, and if they can just manage to stay between them and between Platoon and the marks, then that would be their general game plan, you would imagine.
Yeah, you think so. I mean, this could be the race that there's still 2 more races left. But the points they've got, 12 points, this could be the last race. If they have a good one here, keep Platoon behind them, Platoon might not be able to catch them.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it comes down to penalty points again, as we've seen previously this year. But, this could be the last race of the season for the overall standings. And, I'm sure that's not really in their head. Maybe they think...
I think we'll see Platoon pushing a little bit more. Jenny, what do you think?
Well, I mean, saying Platoon pushing, I think what we're actually seeing is Azura going for a little tiny bit of a match race here with Platoon. So as you can see, it's only 1 minute, 45 seconds to go to the start, and Azura is well on Platoon's stern and forcing them out near past the pin end of the line. So this is quite a fun battle. I think Fergal's team accidentally, Gladiators, just gotten themselves in the mix, not
again.
on purpose, but yeah, exactly. But this we're seeing Protest flags flying already, and I think now Platoon. So Azura just messed up there. They didn't mean to get caught and hooked as they are, and now they've gone from being the aggressor to being aggressed, and this is a mistake for the Italians. 1 minute 20 seconds to go. They are deep. They were kind of in a strong, powerful position to the stern of Platoon and pushing them out past the pin, and instead now Platoon to lured, Platoon with kind of the powerful position. Azura with 1 minute on port tack here. They're going to be struggling to stay clear of Platoon all the time and get into a spot where they can then lay the pin in, and that's what they need to do. So they've got 53 seconds to go, and it's going to be full on to just make sure that they're staying below the line. So that's essentially what Platoon's going to be trying to do, is force Azura above the line. And actually, maybe Platoon's just given them just let them go a little bit there. So yeah, 35 seconds to go here. Azura going for the attack. Yep. Platoon's just let them go, but Allegre kind of in their way. And as you guys can see, sled middle of the course, sled going. No pressure for us. We're winning already by 11 points. We've got 20 seconds here. We're fast as, and also you can tell the breeze
lining up
died
beside them
quite
again.
a lot. No, Azura's got Allegre in between.
No,
I think that's about, at the moment, you'd be happy to have in between. They haven't had their best regatta, but 9 seconds to go. Azura is late. Allegre might be winning this start. 5 seconds there. Up at the top, Provezza looking good as well. 3, 2, 1. So Provezza, boat into the line. Allegre, pin into the line. As you were just saying, you can never, ever count Quantum Racing out. They also looked like they had a decent start up at the boat, but Azura is going to have a little bit to do here to try to foot off from Allegre. Allegre is very much bow punched at the pin and looking good, but meanwhile, guys, it has gotten a lot lighter out on the race course. It's only about 12, 14 knots maximum here at the moment, so a very different game plan than the first race.
And how do Platoon look off the start line, Jenny? They're look a little bit deep momentarily, just looking at them in virtual. Yeah, they're. We can see them just between Allegre and Azura in our picture just now. So they're not special either.
I was going to say they were covered for me, but actually they've just popped out the back of the whole fleet here. So yeah, I'm seeing them underneath Brennensek, behind the line of almost the entire fleet, except for the guys tacked already. So assuming Platoon tacks soon here, because they're deep and they're covered. Now, the race course is set up about 10 degrees further left than we saw earlier, where 275, I think, and previous race was set for 285. And again, breeze lighter. And the forecast, or multiple forecasts today, had the breeze kind of dying off midday to afternoon like this, dying off and possibly going a touch north rather than the west-northwest that we're seeing. So this could be a big mix-up of the race. It could be a lot of different moves and different race course sort of opening up in a way that we didn't see in the relatively consistent, breezy first race. So I think it's almost a surprise to me that Platoon hasn't tacked out yet, because I think the right side of the course might have come back into play, or might come back into play a little bit more.
Fargo.
I mean, with the dying breeze, there's always going to be a little shift in there, and we've seen these early lefts pay and these late rights pay when the breeze was down in a couple of races. I think yesterday the first race was fairly similar conditions, maybe a little bit breezier now. But I think both Azura and Platoon are both in tough spots there, as Jenny said. You know,
it was really all about that little match race, if you like, the little head-to-head, just the split by Allegre, but that cost them time coming onto the line.
I mean, I think both tacticians, seeing Allegre coming down there, I don't know if they both had a plan in place where Azura said we can tack here and split off with Allegre, and Platoon can't come with us, or Platoon said we can duck Allegre here, Azura can't come with us. So they got the split. So maybe there was a bit of a tactical game going on with Allegre there.
But it certainly
neither really paid off.
Yeah, neither paid off. But Azura in a little bit of a tough spot there.
I think actually from that start, for me, Allegre got the best start in terms of boat speed off the line and position. But for me, against the virtual, Quantum winning this race, Azura still Allegre have to tack. It looks like they're in a slightly bit more right pressure here. The bow's gone up a little bit right. If Quantum go into the first here, Azura and Platoon are down in 6th, 7th place. Yeah. The top three really squeezes together, and all of a sudden it's not the Azura Platoon show any more than it was this morning. And when dock out, all of a sudden Quantum are very much in the mix. And we said that Azura could close out the championship in this race, but they could also bring Quantum way back into the
I mean, they're in a little bit of a tough spot there relative to Provezza. According to our images, Provezza have the upper hand there. Quantum pinned. Sled, though, popping out second or third on virtual, Jenny.
Yeah, I mean, the hard part here is I think I'm a bit like Fergal. I just want to see the points close all the way to the end. And I think we need to see Quantum Racing winning. We need to see Platoon kind of mid-fleet. And we need to see Azura deep for the points to get really close for the overall series. And we can't just have Sled run away with it again, because then there's just less points to play with for the rest of them. But
Yeah.
Sled doing a phenomenal job to hold off the hip of Allegre here. Allegre not quite able to kind of bow down over Azura. Azura is actually doing a decent job of just barely keeping their lane, but it would be pretty brutal for Azura to attack right now. I think they're pinned ultimately by Platoon, and that's why Platoon's maybe hung in the mix here, is actually they're the one that's forcing Azura further left. And if Azura was to attack here, Platoon could go for a bow down kind of match race hunt scenario. And I think this is, even though it doesn't look like a match race from the outside, the two of those boats are very well aware of where each other are, and they are playing with each other even if they're deep in the fleet.
I mean, looking at Sled here, they got off the line on time, clear air, and they've already gone. I bet if you rewound this race,
Interesting.
from
Azura
this
going.
perspective, you would
Platoon
see.
went first. Jenny?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, that's the match race. So Platoon held them out as long as they could and then has gone, now we need to make our way through the fleet. And they know they wouldn't have made their way through the fleet if they got stuck out in this left corner. So Platoon let them go, and Azura is just staying in touch and trying to either cover or at least keep Platoon close to them. So, yeah, while the fight at the front is maybe between Sled, Allegre, and Quantum, the fight at the back is still for the overall series. And actually, it looks like lefty on Azura means they're better off on Platoon than it perhaps
Than you thought, yeah. I mean, it's a little bit what we saw in the second race yesterday, from memory. But Azura going back at Phoenix 11. That could be interesting. Platoon will go behind them, I think, Fergal.
Yeah, I think there'll probably be a dip on both boats. Will have to dip Phoenix here, and actually Azura being in the stronger position might end up in the weaker position because they have a bigger dip to do. A dip in this fleet is 3 boat lengths straight away. So if Platoon can keep their lane, not have to do a dip, and Azura end up having to do a dip, that hasn't played out as Phoenix actually lead-bowed Platoon then have come back. So it's going to be a bit of a ding-dong between Platoon and Azura here. Might see Azura dip.
Momentarily with Platoon. We'll see what happens here. It should be disconverting.
Ding-dong. Meanwhile, on the left side here, Sled was able to leave out Allegre from the left. And in fact, it looks like Quantum Racing and Preveza both easily crossing Sled and Allegre, and even Team Vision Future not crossing but planning the lead bow. So in the end, it was the middle of the start line that's well punched here. Quantum Racing leading Preveza, but not enough to tack. So it's going to be Preveza in the controlling position at the moment until they tack, if Quantum can then live on top. But those 4 boats probably fighting for the top 4 positions. And yeah, with Azura and Platoon both deep, Azura just now tacking to cover Platoon, I think it really does put Quantum well back in the mix.
Meanwhile, I think Gladiator have started the delivery home. They've gone so far out to the right. They've gone without me. Just fine.
Well done, guys.
I'll bring the chase boat. No, they've got. I mean, I think Jenny said there were a couple of protest flags up in the pre-start. Gladiator getting into the mix of another battle, and they came off the line really late on port. I think they might have had a penalty over there, so they've just had to ring the bell, go hard right. You're not going to overtake anyone being bounced around in the middle of the fleet. So it's been a hard right, hoping it's going to pay. I hope it's going to pay.
I hope it's going to pay too. In the meantime, Azura and Platoon side by side again. Azura with a controlling position just now, Jenny?
Yeah, it looks like it. I think the reality is we might still have Phoenix and Gladiator come in to play with those guys a little. If they decide to hit either Azura or Platoon, then they'll be, and here goes Phoenix for the tack. Then they'll be affected and have to deal with that. But we could sort of think about this podium as well for this regatta. So it's Sled obviously well out in front with 11 points ahead of Azura. But there it's only then the 4 points back to Quantum Racing and then 3 points back to Platoon. And if those guys end up well deep, then it's kind of a wide open door with Phoenix, Preveza, and Brnenisek to kind of try to come back into the mix. So I don't think Azura and Platoon really care about this podium. You know, if Sled's going to win this regatta, then they do only just care about the overalls. But it's interesting for all the rest, for Quantum particularly. I'm sure they'd much rather be second here and second or first in the series if the other guys are well deep. But it's just race by race at the moment.
Did on board, I think, with Platoon there. Gonna have to tackle away from Phoenix 11. There we see it. It's not helping their cause, Fergal, is it?
No, it's not. I mean, you want to minimise the amounts of tacks you have to do up here, especially tacks in bad air and dirt, and especially when your greatest rival
is just crossing
clear air crossing.
What will Azura do now? Will they just keep going, or?
Well, they haven't really got. I mean, if they tack here and there's so many boats above them, yeah, they'll be on starboard and they can get across a few people, but then they have to come back on port at some point. I think they're not too far from the starboard lay here. They'll probably let Platoon get bounced around a little bit in the middle of the fleet, I imagine.
But this has to be good for Azura. Azura can get another couple of boats between them. But as you say all the time, Quantum Racing appear to be popping out in front, according to Virtual Jenny. First place, Platoon, we have them in 10th. That's pretty telling when it comes to the circuit standings.
They're only 4 points separate on the circuit standings, with Platoon ahead by 4. So Quantum putting a 9-point barrier would easily put Quantum into second on the podium. But I don't know that that's going to stay accurate through the top mark. I think as we can see Platoon and Azura coming over here to the left-hand side, they are going to get clear behind the rest of the fleet. And it doesn't look like the fleet is stacked up on the port ley line like they have been in the previous races. So there is still a little bit more field of play left out on the left-hand side for these two guys to come back into the mix a little. And while Quantum's probably leading, I think Platoon and Azura might just wiggle free, maybe with some top lefties here. It looks like there's really good breeze up here on the top left. But on the far side, Gladiator is coming back into it, but it looks like Phoenix, well, is Phoenix gonna? No, they're going for a last minute duck. So instead of lee bowing, they're deciding starboard lay is a bit further on, and it's the time to go further for starboard lay. So I think a brutal discussion there on Phoenix, because it was just probably too late, and that was a really hard U-turn of a duck. But it means Gladiator's looking a bit better than maybe we thought they are. And as they come into the next group of 3, they're getting lifted as well on the right. So it's a little bit of a lefty on the left here, with Azura and Platoon fighting the righty on the right of Gladiator.
Yeah, you can just see that pink track of Gladiator. You know, in the last 10 boat lengths, there's been a little bit more right pressure in it, and they've just been lifted up, and you know, they've moved the race course right to the left a little bit. I think Jenny said it went 10 degrees around to the left at 275, yeah. And maybe there's a touch more breeze just over on the right hand side. So it's what do you go for? Do you go for the left shift, or do you go for the better pressure?
Little match race developing. Our Platoon.
A huge match race developing here. I mean, this is Platoon calling for basically the leeward boat luffing the weather boat, but Azura is happy to put Platoon last behind them to decide when they want to attack, and that was really, really nicely executed by Azura. So green flag from the umpires, no harm, no foul there. As the weather boat, they still stayed well clear of Platoon, and yet Platoon, you can see how slow they are here for having luffed for that long, and also in the gas of Azura while they're on the ley line already. So kind of a brutal spot for Platoon, but they had to try to throw something into the mix.
They did indeed, but you know, in kind of match race terms, it's a fascinating balance, isn't it? Because you have the pro match racers, the cup winners on the Platoon, and but you have an amateur driver in Harm, and then on the Azura you have the pro driver.
That's a real test of nerves, that moves.
Yeah.
You've got to have, you know, pretty big stones to try and
Let's
do
have a
that
quick look at it again. I think we can replay it. Fergal, you can talk about it if you wouldn't mind. Let's have a very quick look at it. Yeah.
You just see Platoon go for that little dip of speed, but Azura come with them. Yeah, that's Santi Senio come with them, and there's a little build of speed. They come up, and you know they're still on starboard. They're still the leeward boat, and Azura just hold their nerve just to keep their speed and go forward. And Platoon think they got too close, and I think Azura just had that slightly better speed. That's, you know, the turn of the tiller, not putting the brakes on too much, and they just coasted clear forward. the umpires think it was okay. And I think that was a real test of nerve for both helms. One to get it right to put the penalty on, and one to get it right to make sure they don't get the penalty. And in that scenario, Guiget won the battle. But it was what else can you do from platoon? You're not going to overtake them in a straight line to leeward of them, so you have to do something. And I think that's the beauty of this racing. We don't see match racing in a 10-boat fleet that often. So to see it all starting to develop, and I think who's going to love that the most is probably Quantum, looking back going, hey, we're pretty close to winning this race. You two can play with each other all day. If we can put 8 boats between us.
Quantum do appear to have dropped a little bit. I'm not sure what's been happening, but they're certainly not in the top 3, top 4 as we expected. But Jenny, maybe you could update us on Quantum.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting part there is we were talking earlier about the righty on the right and the lefty on the left, and Quantum was just in the middle. Yeah, so they went from what looked like leading the race to they're no longer the heroes here. They're probably sitting 4th, something like that, and it has nothing to do with the Azura platoon battle behind them. It was just they were picking in the middle of 2 shifts.
Yeah. Gladiator getting back into it a little bit, as you said, Fergal.
Yeah, they minimised manoeuvres as well. They came off the line on port. They had only done 1 tack by the time they got back to the fleet, and that could be 3-4 tacks less. That could equal 10 boat lengths less manoeuvring time than the rest of the fleet. And with a possible bit more pressure, maybe a little bit of right, you go from starting 50 metres behind the fleet because of a penalty right back into the mix. I think it's a good move to do. You're either going to come out the same distance behind, or you're going to be back in. And you've got to do one thing. It's like we say so often, you can't just. It's very, very hard to pick your way through a fleet in such bad air. There's a whole nest of bad air in amongst those 10 boats in the middle. It's very hard to fight your way through from behind there. And they've just made a simple move, and well, hopefully it comes off for them.
I don't know, guys, as they come into the top mark, I mean, just look at the white boat pulling their way into the front again. If this is 4 bullets in a row out of what'll be 8 races, they're already sitting at a 2-point average, right? Because with 7 races, they've got only 14 points. So they're averaging 2nd place for the whole regatta on board sled. And they're about to at least be leading at the top mark for another time around. So it is pretty spectacular to see bow number 5 and the Whitehall having just overtaken Allegre on that far side. Somewhere in there, they just had a tiny bit better speed. Provezza coming into the top mark, going to struggle to find an easy spot to tack in here. I don't think Allegre is really that overstood. That's the spot that looks like the easy answer to go for, especially just with the ability to cross bow forward just a touch. But we might see them struggle after this if they're a little bit shy of the line, especially Brunenisek's getting into the fight. So sled coming around, sled just pulling half a boat length in front. Allegre just rolling over the top of Provezza there. Provezza's really going to have to try to, well, it's not too much further actually, 1 boat length. They'll be okay. They'll hold on, and actually they'll probably still hold off Allegre to their outside and round. That's the luff there, but they'll round in 3rd with Brunenisek then in 4th. And unfortunately, Team Vision Future getting into 5th, which means Quantum Racing has dropped all the way to 6th. Gladiator in 7th from that right-hand side, so not quite the delivery home yet, but not the right paying the way that they would have wanted. And out the back, Phoenix leading, Azura leading Platoon, but not enough boats for Quantum to completely overtake Platoon at the moment. But I think that'll mean that they are probably tied for the series if it stays as is with Platoon out the back. So really, really interesting. And just such an incredible job for sled to be leading again for the 4th race in a row.
But in the big picture, Jen, even though Azura and Platoon are pretty deep, Azura just really need to be in front of or close to Platoon to secure the title. Remember, we've only got 8 boats in the championship. They're going in with an 11-point lead.
Yeah, an 11-point lead and a 16-point lead on Quantum Racing. So that's the question mark, is if Quantum had won, could they have still been last in 2 races in a row, and could Quantum have taken the series? And the answer to that, I think, is no, based on the actual point scores. So yeah, regardless, they're just worried about Platoon, and that's why they're kind of in the back playing the match race game with Platoon. And yet I think reality is right now we'll see them just trying to move through the fleet. From here, now they've got Platoon behind them and deep, then Azura can just keep going forward and try to put a couple more points in the bag. And Quantum is deep enough already that it's not really a concern for the Italians.
Certainly Azzurra can then secure the title in this race.
You have to be pretty calm on that boat now. They've done what they need to do with that little match race tactic up there, or defending that little match race tactic. And I think it'll be a very special moment. You see Pablo Roma's on board today. It'll be a great moment on home waters, in front of your home club.
Haven't seen the spectator fleet like we expected it, Jenny. There was a few more boats out yesterday.
You know, I think it might just be earlier in the day. We probably had about this number of boats yesterday. And also it was so much windier this morning that if you're just going out for a cruise and you know the breeze
so pleasant.
Die a touch. You might just wait for this moment.
Well, hopefully maybe Don Cowie will spill the beans and give us a bit more of an insight into why the sled is going so quick. But I mean, for sure, I think they've been working very hard in their sail programme. And he said they've made progressive modifications since they missed out and didn't race in Cascais. They were pretty strong at times in Portals.
Yeah, I think they were leading the first 2 days of Portals.
That's right.
They've definitely been doing something right. The sailing team's incredible. The boat's a great boat. We knew that. The shore team do an amazing job between Julian, Luke, Matt, and Chris. They're such a strong team. They're good friends of ours, and it's very nice. It's very nice to see another boat getting up the front. I think they came third in their first season back in 2014.
That's right.
15 with their boat.
14.
And they had the number 3 on the bow, and no one's won a regatta other than Ran, Platoon, Quantum, and Azzurra. So it's going to be Corvette. Yeah, it'll be very nice to see another boat get a win here, and they're just doing it in such style by winning so many races. I don't know if Quantum have ever won as many races in one regatta as these guys have.
Not recently.
I mean, last year Quantum was so dominant. They won the season by a fair few races to spare, if I remember rightly, in Valencia at the end. It's nice to see the overall come down to the wire a bit, but Sled are just running away. I think I'm not sure if they clinch they can close out the regatta on this race.
Should be able to.
I think certainly if they win this, then I think we should just give it to say no last race. Sled, you go home. You know, you've done it. Well done. Don't put your feet up.
But Allegri had a good start in second just now, but they really, Jenny, they've kind of blown hot and cold. We've said that a few times. I think they're one of the teams who've won. I think they've won 6 races over the course of the season, which is a pretty good average all in all. But they've also had some pretty deep scores and averaging out, just about okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at their series, they've gotten a 6th, 6th, 7th, 5th. So as their overall spot in the last 5 regattas. So never really in full contention for the podium on the final day in the way that they would like. And I think even in this race, we saw a beautiful start by them, really nice speed, and then they just kind of couldn't quite handle Sled's advances on the top mark. So it's almost like here Sled has just had an extra gear. It's unfair for us to compare them to other teams because something is going on board. Maybe, like you said, they're spilling the beans. Maybe that's what they're having for breakfast, beans. A little extra rocket fuel to get them through the day. But yeah, Allegri just not quite able to match. And I think it's hard here as well. They've got a new tactician this week, whereas the entire rest of the season they've sailed with Andy Horton on board. So perhaps when it gets close like that at the top mark and the situation gets a bit tense, if you have someone new telling you what to do, it's just a little bit more difficult for the helmsman to react and respond in exactly the perfect way.
Yeah, just a quick note on the number of wins through the fleet this season. Sled, in fact, if they win this race, would be the boat which would have won most races with 9. Platoon have won 7. Quantum and Allegri will have won 6. So interesting to note that Allegri would win 6 races and still finish quite far down the circuit standings.
I think that being the case, and not mentioning Azura's name in that.
That tells a story, doesn't it? I mean, Azura have won. I had a note of how many races they've won, but they haven't won that many races over the course of the season. They haven't won a race this regatta.
So I mean, this whole fleet's about consistency. It's the 8s and 9s that break you, but we always used to say that, or we always do still say that 4 points a race will win you the regatta.
That's right.
Apart from this one where you need one point per race to win a regatta.
Well, that's it. I think that's right. At the moment, or going into today, Sled's average was 2.1 points per race, which is the lowest regatta winning average, assuming they do.
This race right now, I mean, they're sitting on 14 total with 7 races in the bag, so it's 2 exactly. They've got this 1/6 place that's really marring their podium finishes. I mean, if it was not for that 6th, it would be all top 2s and 1s. So it is an absolutely phenomenal regatta that they are sailing. I think full credit to that team, and everyone's giving them the hats off. Like, they were fully cheered on shore yesterday by a number of different owners, giving them some congratulations, because yesterday was such a stellar day, and then today to come out and win both races, like, no one would imagine that any team could do this. I think even Azura we would be surprised if they were doing this. I just counted, Andy, it's 5 races for Azura race wins, so just sitting behind the other 6 teams that you mentioned for the year, but it makes sense. They're consistently at the top. They've never won a regatta. They've won 5 races when other teams have won much more than that, but they are leading the series for it.
So meantime, Azura in 9th and 10th. Azura now doing what they need to do to close out the circuit. Unfortunately, that may jeopardise Platoon's 2nd overall for the circuit. Certainly give them a battle in the last race. But Fergal, a few words about the owners in this fleet. You know, you were saying that everybody was cheering Takashi Akura ashore yesterday. There's a great camaraderie between the owners. They're very much like-minded individuals, and they all root for each other as much as possible, off the water, on the water, adversaries.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, literally everyone's in the same boat here, and every owner knows exactly how hard it is to win a race. Every owner knows how lucky you are to win 2 races.
And what you have to put in for the season, you know.
The effort and the time, the commitment away from, the guys have day jobs, and they leave them to come here and, kind of switch off from work mode and get into a different work mode. And, I mean, certainly we're all applauding Mr. Akura for how well he's doing, how calm he's staying. I think a lot of the close-up shots we see of Sled coming across like the spreader leg, you see Mr. Akura standing up off the rail to see where he's going, see where the spreader mark is before the hoist. He is cool as a cucumber. Yeah. There's zero flap. He's just full concentration. You see him there. He hasn't moved a muscle in the last 20 seconds of us looking at him coming down here. He's checking around a little bit.
Zen and the art of helmsmanship.
He's got ears on the guys telling him where to go. He's got ears listening to what's going on around the boat. He's got eyes on the numbers, eyes on the sails, and he's just full concentration. And that's what you have to do. Yeah. And all the team rely on him to be doing that, so they can do their work properly. And he's making it very easy for the team, really easy.
Jen, then Sled, Whitehall leading at the first leeward gate, 2nd race of the day.
Yeah,
Walk us through this rounding.
A beautiful job again, always from the bow team on board. Jeremy Lomas, and Andrew McCourtley, and then Robbie Naismith, the battler, the kind of America's Cup legend, still in the jib trim position down to leeward. But just such a phenomenal regatta and week for this team, and I think so well deserved for them. I think you're right that if they win this race with Quantum where they are and Azura and Platoon where they are, then they actually could not sail the final race and could count a DNF or a DNS score-wise. They're just so far ahead, and this no team has won a regatta this year with such a lead. No teams even come into the final day this year with such a lead. So it's been a pretty fantastic effort by them, and I think it really should be applauded. We should send them in early. Just go early. Go start the celebration now. We know the XS party is going on tonight, the XS Energy Drinks party, and they could just start a little extra celebration. But meanwhile, behind them, Provetza coming around the left-hand mark in 2nd on this side. The far side, Allegre rounding actually in 2nd overall. Just after Allegre, Brenenisek and Phoenix decided the right-hand side looked good. On this side, Team Vision Future, again, well in the mix at the moment, Andy and Fergal, which is nice to see. Quantum Racing dropped back even a touch more, I think. They were higher up than this, and now they've got just Azura in their stern quarter. And Gladiator, not the best downwind, has lost out to both Azura and Platoon.
Yeah, Fergal just grimacing as Gladiator attack on top of, Azura attack on top of Gladiator. Azura with a little bit of housework to do there, but they're keeping an eye on Platoon to leeward. You can see 2 or 3 members of the crew looking under the boom at their main adversaries for the title. A little bit of a split between Platoon and Azura. Platoon getting themselves out to the right a little bit, Jenny.
And I think it's hard, again, to tell which side's going to pay. I think now that the breeze is just a touch more up, again, you can see more white caps here than we had the first leg. I would probably have a bit more gut feeling that the left will be looking good and looking strong, and probably happier with the decision-making of sled. But when you're so far back, as Platoon is, you kind of have to throw the dice, and the dice right now are going to the right because the whole rest of the fleet ultimately is on the left in front of them. So there are some boats they could pick off. Unfortunately for Quantum Racing, that's probably one of the closer teams that they could pick off because they've dropped down so much. Team Vision Future as well, having just tacked from this left-hand corner. Maybe we could see them falling back through the pack, and maybe even Phoenix. So Platoon and Azura could have their sights on a couple different boats, but it's just a difficult game. I'm really surprised by Quantum not actually putting a bit more motor through the fleet on that downwind.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I think the dynamic, I was talking to Cameron Appleton and also watching to see what's going on board. I think that Ed is playing a little bit more of the, Ed Baird is playing a little bit more of a tactical role, and I think Cameron's more doing strategy. I may be wrong, but that was what I seem to have seen, and what Cameron was inferring when we spoke to him on the dock yesterday.
Well, we spoke about this yesterday as well. I think their two personalities are so so different.
Yeah.
I mean, Cameron might live in the US now and for about the last 20 years, but he is ultimately a Kiwi at heart. And you put a Kiwi who's, quiet and softly spoken in the way that Murray Jones is a Kiwi and quiet and softly spoken against, I wouldn't say Ed Baird is brash, but he is an American and he is from Florida, and he does have his opinions and he holds to them. And I think that dynamic on board with
and
such
a track record to back it up, Jenny.
Exactly. With such a good sailor as Ed, it's a really hard dynamic to fight against. I mean, internally, it just wouldn't be something that Cameron would feel like is a battle he needs to fight, because he's not a battler in that respect. So I think it almost makes sense just from the get-go that they should make that switch and go for strategy and tactics and then just go from there. And I think that's probably fine. But it hasn't really, in this race at least, it hasn't really paid that they've been able to come through the fleet in a way that we kind of all think we thought they would.
Yeah, I mean, that's clearly what we saw yesterday. We've seen Ed more proactive round the deck, and when I spoke with Cameron, he was pretty much saying that he's doing more of the big picture stuff, supplying the information to Ed, and Ed making the decisions, and Cameron kind of managing Doug a little bit. But meantime, Platoon got a couple of boats between them and Azura, but it's not going to be enough. This the race changing all the time, other than the top placings. Certainly quite open, Fergal.
Yeah, Platoon have just put the afterburners on after that bottom mark. They got a pretty clear mark rounding on the right hand mark as you look upwind. One less maneuver. Azura had the long way to go around behind Quantum. They had to reach off a little bit before they tacked. There's a few boat lengths lost there. Maybe it wasn't the mark they really wanted to go to. They had one extra maneuver. Platoon got a bit clearer lane, and certainly by virtue it's got Platoon a couple of places up on Azura, and I think that split was kind of dangerous. You add a couple more boats into the factor in a couple more boats at the bottom mark, and you can make a nice little gain. And I think Platoon really made a nice gain, and you can see them there absolutely rocketing along on the other side of Team Vision Future. and that's exactly what they need to do. And the more boats that if they can pick away at Phoenix, if Azura don't quite get back into the mix with them. I'm not sure which side of the course Azura went on. I think they kind of went right and
middle left, I think.
But
no, they're out to the right now.
But no, this is exactly what Platoon need to do, and if they can get within 8 points of Azura on the overalls, then it still goes down to the last race. Unfortunately for Quantum, where they were looking at the top of the first beat, looked like they were going to be a bit more involved in the overall race. They've just slipped back, and they had a tough downwind. But Sled are just ripping. This is a fairy tale ending to their season, having missed one event, and knowing they weren't really going to be in contention for the overall, to go out on a
tough one, really. Mr. Akura is a very avid member of the New York Yacht Club and wanted to be there for the 175th celebrations. I think the whole team raced there, didn't they?
Yeah, a lot of the team, they went out. They got a 12 metre, and there were a lot of 12 metres involved in the 175th anniversary. We were there with a 52 as well, and it was something very special over there. It's something that's not going to happen for a long time, and being, like you say, an avid member of that yacht club, something you can't really miss out on. I think they had a very good time over there. A few of the shore team went over and helped with the 12 bit. Well, fairly different to a 52.
A little bit.
They still managed to get on just fine.
So watching Sled then coming up to Provetsa's line. We'll cross them. Kenny, conditions look fantastic.
They really do look fantastic. I mean, I think
pipped up again.
The team that'll think it's not fantastic is Quantum. I think we just can see this left-hand side has a tiny bit less pressure and maybe a kind of an overarching right shift as well. So Quantum, having had a bad downwind and then being the furthest left boat, I think might be seeing the entire fleet in front of them as they tack onto port here out of this bottom left corner. And that's to the credit of Platoon, as Fergal was saying. Platoon picking kind of the correct mark, the right mark, and then making some major gains thereafter, both gaining Quantum and Team Vision Future and Azura behind them as well now. So I think what we thought might be Quantum's time to shine and at least to get into perhaps the silver position for the overall series is now turning right on its head and going back the way of Platoon, being able to keep their series fight alive with Azura behind them. But let's just see as it goes whether Quantum can even put themselves between Platoon and Azura. That would be perfect, yeah.
In the meantime, all the time, Team Vision Future hanging in there quite nicely. That Quantum jib in our picture.
I think Team Vision Future have really, this is their first season with us. They've been sailing 52s in kind of IRC mode. We've seen them in Copa del Rey and in Palma Vela over the years. They're a solid team, and they've always been in and around the mix. It's hard to come into this fleet with an older boat and a newer crew. I'm not sure of the amount of amateurs on board or whether there's an amateur element to it.
French amateurs.
But the guys they're a solid team, a really nice bunch on the dock.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, we unfortunately lost Pat Breck this year, so it's always nice to have another boat come in and fill that spot and speak the same language as well, so we don't understand them either.
It's a little ding-dong, as Fergal likes to call it, between the Platoon and Azura.
Well, first they hit Quantum.
Yeah.
They forced Quantum back out to the left, and Quantum's actually done a double tack and come back on port. And then they took that hit over to Azura. And yeah, just playing the game now for Platoon. They're protecting against both. They've just hit Quantum again a third time here, which is good. It lets them cover Azura and force Quantum back out. We're starting to get close to this port side ley line here. I think probably Team Vision Future's not quite on it, but when Provetsa comes up and tacks here, they'll be much closer to port ley. So a little bit of an easier job now for Platoon to decide. You'd rather just hit to the left and then have your final hit be covering these guys. But at the same point in time, if they've got Azura underneath them, they'll just hang for the moment.
But generally quite an even beat by the looks of things. Yeah, right coming strong just now, but our pressure seems to be on that right side. But
Yeah, pretty
A
similar
little
to
bit
the first beat, I
yeah.
think. With I mean, Gladiator had to do that. They're the team that went the furthest right. They had to do it to get clear air, and they've come back into the mix. I think they're going to be pretty close to. They weren't maybe a couple of boat lengths behind Azura on that last cross. But with the left having a little less pressure, as we've kind of seen over the last couple of days, and the right just having a touch more, it's keeps it an even racetrack and lets boats that have been shunted out the back in places get right back into the mix. And unless you're trying to catch sled, and then doesn't matter where you go. I think Pablo needs to go out and make sure that's not a TP62. And that's the first thing.
TP53. Whoa, careful now.
I don't think there was quite enough time between Portals and here.
But yeah, I mean, looking back, or going back to, said a few times, Palma Vela, sled were strong there until they had their Medivac, I think on day 2, wasn't it, Virgil?
Yeah, unfortunately, one of their grinders suffered an injury on board. Had to be. They missed the next day, or that day. Unfortunately, I mean, they still came back strong. They managed to get a replacement in for Chris, who unfortunately had to leave the regatta for that one. And I hope he's doing well. If he's listening in, hope he's on the mend. But yeah, it seems like quite a while ago, Palma Vela, and
but really not much Platoon can do just now. Just hang in and count down to the finish line, I guess, Jenny.
Yeah, I mean, it's surprising, actually. It looks like Azura's gotten a little bit more bow forward.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Recently. Well, maybe it's not surprising. Platoon did about 2 or 3 tacks there that they were hitting Quantum, coming back, hitting Quantum again. So Azura's just done the one tack, the one time that Platoon hit them. So I think reality was they were a tiny bit further right, just rumbling along, and Platoon's now in a tricky spot. They'll have to go out to Azura's line and protect against Azura, but it puts them in this weird middle ground, which means that the boats on the left might be making gains that otherwise Platoon would have wanted to be taking part of. I think maybe they've got Phoenix ahead of them again. I think maybe Quantum Racing and Team Vision Future will come back into the mix and have Platoon and Azura back behind them here. It definitely looks like the left side has come strong just in the last little bit here, and that it's not quite gone the way of Platoon and Azura, but also, you know, our boat's moving forward all the time, so it could just be a little bit of perspective change, and we could see that the boats on the left are overstood one final time to this windward limiter mark, and that they're going to have to bear away, and we'll see the gains in the last second right that we've seen in the previous races. But meanwhile, Sled's called just a beautiful port tack ley line, just tacking now onto starboard for another solid lead again here, Andy. Another probably 5 boat lengths behind them to Allegre as they round the top mark, and they've just got another set of wheels, another set of decision making on board that nobody else has been able to match. This is just such a phenomenal performance.
I mean, I think, you know, the key is getting in front and then being able to sail their own race. They've just got to clear of Allegre relatively early on.
yeah, they've just been involved in 0 battles this week.
Yeah.
Just been off the start line clean, and once.
And it is that kind of race course generally. If you can get out in front, you've not got any private battles. I remember going back to the Rolex TV52 World Championship in Puerto Portales. Sled did have that mini run with a 112, and then they went 9-10 in the 11 boat fleet, and that really paid to their regatta hopes.
Yeah, they've definitely.
I think sometimes when that kind of thing happens, then you really want to even more. You know you can do it, and I think that's probably what's spurred them onto this higher level here, higher plane.
I bet if you asked them at the beginning of the season, would they have won 7 races out of the last 17, or at the end of this one, 8 races out of 18? I think they probably go, no one's doing that. But you know, between Portals and here, whatever they've done is incredible, and their
Oh man,
next season is going to be the boat to beat.
that wrap in their kite could have been the beginning of a downfall, but it came out not beautifully, but came out quite quickly on board sled there. So they did have a little tiny bit of an hourglass for the first 3 boat lengths as they rounded, but filled now in only a 2.5 boat length lead to Allegre, but again, windy enough that it's hard to do any major catching up. So Allegre, meanwhile, a really nice lead to a very, very, very tight pack here from 3rd place to 10th place. So Bernenasek leading the pack at the moment, and since they're sitting tied for 6th overall, they'll be happy to have Preveza behind them. That's their tie, and going right into the jibe set. So I like it. Trying to roll the dice with that whole fleet behind them, I think it makes sense. So we thought there was maybe a touch more breeze out on the right, and the right peg a little, at least further down the course, the right paid on the upwind. Preveza with a straight set. Phoenix just behind them going into the jibe set as well. Platoon also. So maybe a little bit of a right shift at the top mark too, I think. We've seen the 2 boats in front here, 2 sled and Allegre just jibe. Allegre matching sled there. And I'm hearing umpire whistles. I can't see who's the one who's put a penalty, called for a penalty, but it looks like it's been a green flag because no one's spinning. Quantum just jibing on the inside there of Team Vision Future, and Azura as well. Azura just putting Quantum and Team Vision Future behind them by staying on the right at the very last second there. But ooh, Gladiator with a brooch in the back of the pack there. Sorry, Fergal, but came out of their jibe a bit too high, and they've actually just had to completely blow the kite. They pulled it off without completely broaching, but just tiny bit of a puff rounding right as they jibed, and it jibed a little hot, and it was not their best maneuver.
So looking pretty good all in all for Azura coming down this second run, race 2.
Yeah, we've seen
one boat between them and Azura. So go on, Fergal.
We've seen the split earlier in the week actually, where people have done the early jibe, and you know, because it was the right thing to do, and then the boats who have either been forced to go straight have actually come out a bit better. Certainly earlier on in the week, I think the practice day and some of the training days we were doing, some of the practice training days between all the teams, we saw that the left side downwind looking favoured, and then the boats forced out to the right actually made the gain. So it'll be an interesting one here. I think Azura kind of got forced out to the right because they had to roll Team Vision Future, and Platoon were able to get that jibe set in as they wanted to do. So I imagine it's not part of the game plan that Azura and Phoenix did a complete course split like they're doing, and Azura just jibing back there and hoping that they either get a bit of a header or a touch more pressure coming in here. But you know, this is what Platoon really want, is that the kind of 4 boats around them, the Phoenix, Quantum, Team Vision Future, kind of get him in between and make sure there's a race.
They're pretty arced up there though. But yeah, we had a quick look there at the projected series standings. Maybe look at that again if you don't mind. But there's 10 points, well 9 points now. The 10 points between Azura and Platoon as the positions stand. That would be enough to give Azura the 2019 title if things stay as they stand, and very often they don't. Santi Lange there at the back of the boat looking upwind, watching the breeze rolling down on home waters for the team, and I think Sled Jenny would also do enough to secure their regatta title if things stay as they are.
Yeah, I was just wondering here, Andy, if it's worth hopping on board either of those boats after this race. I think it's sometimes too hard to do the math and tell a team that they've won if you're not actually the race committee or the umpires or the official word on it. Says the media team you've won the regatta is never the right answer. So, but I think for sure Sled, I mean, we all can actually do the math for Sled, and they will have taken this regatta, and it's going to be an exceptional. If they could put one more in the bag with one more bullet in the last race, I think they would rather do that than go in and start celebrating early. So I think probably we'll see them going hard for another one, especially as the breeze is now just lifting back up again, and they've been so good when it's windy. I think they've just got this extra gear that they're using both upwind and downwind in the super breezy conditions. And I also think in terms of decision making, I mean, they kind of are reading the course in a way that they're never in that battle on the left-hand side. They've never been the boat that's overstood that port ley line. The one race on day 2 of racing, the first race, when the rest of the team bailed out of the left early when we thought maybe it was starting to get a little light on the left, Sled actually was the only one to go into the corner hard enough to get the left shift and came back across. And we thought they were going to be struggling from the left. And in fact, Platoon won from the right and Sled just rounded the top mark second. And that was patience that nobody else had. Everyone else tacked out of that left-hand side when it got light. So I think they've just been doing all the right things, not just boat speed, but just the decision-making on board means they're fully firing on all cylinders.
But yeah,
been fabulous.
But I think you touched on it earlier, Jen, that if you've got boat speed, you can afford to not have to push too hard on the start line in terms of your positioning, the risk reward on the start line. Let's not forget they won that first race off the right-hand end of the line in the opening day. But also, I mean, I think that to a certain extent, when you have a momentum, and we've had 2-3 race days, essentially, it's slightly easier to keep the momentum up, is it?
Yeah, you don't have to do the mental reset each morning. And
you don't have a night to get the kind of mental wobbles that come in between one day and the next. And also, it's the psychology over the fleet, isn't it? You know, if you're imposing yourself once, twice, it's easier to keep up the momentum and do it 3 times.
Yeah, and I think if we think back to their starts as well, they've never really, no one's that close to them. So they're not necessarily putting themselves in the pin or in the boat position. They've sort of always been in a safe, conservative spot, but they've never had a boat really fighting to leeward of them hard. They've always had a nice hole. They've always been able to accelerate and be close to the line. We haven't really called them as like, oh, Sled's nailed it on any of the starts. They've never been the boat that's been fighting so hard that they had the option to be over. But they've also never actually had anyone kind of to leeward of them and forcing for their spot. So I think you're right a touch in that. But they're having a good day already, then other teams are a bit worried about kind of starting too close to them because they know they're fast. And the reality is then they've been able to just have really nice, really conservative starts, sail the beats really well, stay fast, and sort of no one's touching them. And maybe perhaps the other battles, the other 3 boats of Platoon, Quantum, and Azura, they're just battling enough with each other that they're forgetting about Sled and letting them play their own game. That
pressure on the right side, we saw Azura kind of arced up Fergal. Seems like it's working for them according to Virtual. They may be able to pip Platoon through the finish line, but
P.S. You guys, sorry interrupting, but Provenza's just lost their kite out the back, so huge rip in the spinnaker of Provenza, and unfortunately they were in 3rd place as it happened, so we didn't quite see whether it was caught on a batten around the jibe or anything, but you can see, I'm sure in vision now, the spinnaker coming down on board Provenza, Brunelesek rolling over them, Azura coming into play as well, and such
pace.
Unfortunate timing, because they were just about to score a good race and sitting 6th overall, but very, very close to Phoenix and close enough to Platoon that they were about to start fighting for good spots in this regatta. This is a hugely sad moment for the Turkish team.
Indeed, hard moment for them, but Sled coming through the finish line, Jenny.
So back to the guys in front. They're just, we almost shouldn't even be talking about how good they are. They are just running away with it. Spectacular. Behind them here, Allegre. So nice to see Allegre with a new tactician on board getting a second in this regatta and pulling themselves back up through the fleet a little bit, especially as Phoenix falls back behind them. And then here, Azura, meanwhile, out of nowhere, the medium blue hull kind of coming to fight the darker royal blue hull of Brunelesek. I think Brunelesek will be able to pull off the 3rd place here, but Azura and Platoon, who were 9th and 10th around the top mark, have shown why they're fighting for the series here by really coming into play on this final downwind, and that is going to be Brunelesek, the Russian team, taking 3rd. But I think Azura just, watch this.
What a final run. That's the marks of the champions. There's no doubting. We can hear the applause, and Guichet Parada absolutely delighted. A dream birthday for Guichet.
I'm surprised they even, there we go. They're just going to sail all the way off to the ocean here. Why don't you take the spinnaker down when you can keep celebrating on board? What an awesome achievement that they've just come from behind with 5 boats now crossing the line behind them to take the series win on his 52nd birthday of the 52 Super Series, and to do it in style like that with some back racing, with some defense, and then with the whole fleet out in the back and just got on home waters. This is spectacular.
But Jenny, massive for Santi Lange. Hasn't won a regatta since he joined the team 2 years ago. We know he's not going to be racing with the team next year, but winning the circuit, chapeau Santi and the Azura team.
I mean, it's just like Santi's giving all the hugs everywhere, and he's a light guy, so yeah, that's an easy pickup for their grinder. But I think it's incredible to see how well they've come together as a team. I think last year we talked about them struggling a bit, about how his filling the shoes of Vasco and the personality of Vasco is a hard spot to be in, and yet this is a pretty spectacular achievement that they've had as a team, and the consistency that they have shown all week has been so phenomenal, and of course all series. You know, it's just they did exactly what they needed to do. They put it away with the race in the bag, and I think unfortunately Sled has as well, and we're not quite up with them for the win overall, but we are
Kiwis,
we're so ecstatic. Fair enough, yeah. And Japanese, they'll be happy and smiling, but there won't be the celebrations that we're seeing of the emotional Italian Argentinian team here. So this is pretty fantastic. I bet they'd even let us on board if we tried to make that happen before the next race. But here's the amazing celebrations of the Italian team, and just so well sailed all season.
So well sailed all season, and really, as you say, Jenny, they did what they had to do here, Fergal, didn't they? In the last day, really did keep their composure, didn't get flustered, and secure the title.
Yeah, they exactly as you say, they did exactly what they needed to do. They didn't let the pressure get to them. We've seen it in the past. The pressure has got to them on a day like today, and it didn't today. And you know that final run, they were the only team to go that far right and win.
I mean, for me, that was the mark of the champions elect, if you like, at that point, that they were prepared to just push it and make no mistake. Psychologically, to finish behind Platoon and still want the title, but to finish ahead of them, that's really what you want. It's the icing on the cake.
No, it was, I mean, one end to a season. You know, there's still one more race to go, so they've got to go and have a little.
He's saying time out.
Have one more little fight. And
let's have a very quick look back at the race and how Azura did it. Really, it was down to that final run, but big question is going to be whether Don Cowie or Gagey is going to be drunker tonight, isn't it? Replay.
Well, race 8. A fantastic race out here in Porto Cervo. A bit of a ding-dong battle straight away between Platoon and Azura. Flags were flying, but as we came down to the start line, you can see Azura closest to us here on the drone, and if I just pause it on the start, you can see a bit of a second row start for them. Right up the top there, you can see those formidable sails of Quantum getting a great start. And then the white boat closest to us, Bow 19, Allegre, also with a great start at the pin. And at this point here, we started seeing Azura coming back to Platoon and just staying in touch. And you can see, I'm just going to slow it down, a very aggressive luft maneuver here from Harm Muller on board. They got within touch of them, just trying to sting him with a little penalty, maybe trying to get some points off their lead. A big lunge to windward, but not quite getting close enough. The flag was flying, but it was a green flag, unfortunately for Platoon that time. As we got up to the top mark again, we could see a bit of a battle coming out here with Provetza and Sled. Sled poking their nose out into the lead. But as they came around the top mark, a very formidable sight of Bow 5, White Lightning Sled out in front as they went around the top mark. Just behind them, you can see Allegre and Provetza bow to bow as they got to the stretch mark. Brunellisek in the mix as well. And as the boats stretched off on that long starboard jibe, it was very close. This was after the first jibe. You can see Sled now starting to get a little bit more of a lead, splitting a little bit from Allegre. It was a lot closer than what we could see. You can see Bow 5, Bow 19 locked together. Beautiful maneuver here from Provetza. John Cutler performing a good old slam dunk right in the face of Brunellisek. A big kite collapse on Brunellisek as they crossed, and down to the bottom you can see Sled now coming in on that starboard ley line, dropping the from Allegre. Allegre opting for that right-hand gate. Sled here closest to us as they went round. A great performance really from Team Vision Future. You can see even with the Quantum sail hiking hard on board there, all leaning out, trying to get as much weight overboard, keeping that boat nice and flat. But as we go up to the front of the pack, you can see Sled, after they had crossed on port there, a great lead starting to occur for them as they get up to that starboard ley line, coming into the last rounding, the last top mark here in the penultimate race of 2019. Allegre, bow 19 just behind them, having a great race. It's been a bit of an up-down regatta for them here in Porto Cervo. Going up, we can see Azura just doing a nice little roll maneuver there of Team Vision Future, and slipping past them as they pop the kite up on this final downwind leg. The graphic there showing Azura going a little bit further, and Sled now starting to stretch out, and as they perform their final jibe coming into the line, 4 race wins in a row for Team Sled. A quite outstanding performance, just ahead of Allegre coming through and second, Brunellasek coming through to take third. But the hull of Azura, you can see what it means on board, punching the air. That secures the series win, the 2019 win, Andy. What a fantastic performance by Azura.
Have we got Jen still? Well, the shots there telling their own story. Azura winning the 2019 title with a race to spare, and Sled securing their first regatta win in, I think, in 5 years with us. And Fergal, a very, very well-deserved win. And the mainsail coming down in the Sled. What's going on there?
I mean, maybe they're not opting to do the third race today. I thought maybe the breeze has got up so much.
Well, they don't. Yeah, we can wait and see, but they don't have a championship to a championship position. It's not going to make a big difference. But we'll wait and see. But yeah, a few words about the team. You know, they've been at this for long enough. And to come away with a regatta win, it's big for this team, isn't it?
It's huge for the team who've been here a lot, and they've always been picking away. They've been on the podium in the overall in the past, and I think they've had a couple of podiums before. But to go and win a regatta, it's a huge thing for all the team, and to do it in such style, it's amazing. I can't remember the last time a team finished 8 races or potentially 9 races under 20 points. We've seen 22, I think.
Are they the new Quantum Racing?
Well, they're the new Quantum Ray. We'll have to see next year. It's,
anyway, let's have a look at the regatta standings. Then we've still got a race to go, so don't leave us now. Let's have a look at the regatta standings here at the Audi 52 Super Series Porto Cervo Sailing Week. Sled on 15 points, Azura 14 points behind on 29, Quantum Racing on 35, Platoon 37, Brunellasek 42, Phoenix 44, Pravetsa 49, Allegre 53, Gladiator 64, and Team Vision Future on 73. And then the circuit standings, we've still got a race to go. But Azura, top of the table, 161, 13 points clear of Platoon. Platoon in second, 5 points between them and Quantum Racing. Brunellasek on fourth and a 189, 10 points between them and Quantum Racing. Pravetsa 205 in fifth, Sled 217 in sixth. So there's 12 points between Pravetsa and Sled, and quite a few points between Sled. Well, 6 points actually between Sled and Allegre. So Sled will certainly sail that race. So let's take a little bit of a break before we go into the final race of this season. Join us again in a few minutes for the last race. Well, Fergal, barely time to put a coffee down our necks. We're back into the final race of 2019. What's at stake then? I think the battle here we can still see between Quantum and Platoon for the for both steps in the podium.
Yeah, we've just seen Azura win the overall. We've just seen Sled win the regatta. And now it's down to, I think, 2 points in the regatta for third place in Porto Cervo here.
And 5 points.
5 points for second place in the overall behind Azura. So I think we could see the battle of the quantum sails going on to secure a better podium finish.
A few words about this win for Sled, because it's pretty monumental. We were just saying that Quantum Racing are the only team to have won 5 races in a row, so that's a little target for the Sled guys in this race. Can they win 5 in a row? Azura won 5 at the Copa del Rey, I think, or sorry, here.
Yeah, here in 2016 they won 5
races. Yeah.
To win 5 races in any regatta is amazing. Sled are on 4 or 5.
4 just now, yeah.
4 in a row and 5 for this regatta, so they're looking to take the record of race wins, and they're only going to do it in 9 races. I think Quantum got their 5 in 11 races, so it's a huge thing for Sled. Amazing regatta for them. Huge congratulations to Mr. Okura and the entire team and all the hard work they put in.
A few words about him as an owner. He's very, very discreet. He appears last thing and gets on the boat. He leaves. Kind of disappears very quickly and really does keep himself to himself, doesn't he?
Yeah, we don't see much of him on the dock. The times you do see him, he always has a smile on his face, always very, very happy to say hello, have a handshake, but it's quite a rarity we see him around. He comes down, gets on the boat, full focus, as we've seen in the close-up shots of the boat. Maybe that's his thing. He just comes down, he sails, he focuses.
And obviously, the boat's in keeping with that ethos, isn't it? It's shiny white, there's no graphics, no logos. The names on the back and the New York Yacht Club logo in very small letters, and I think that tells its own story. And equally, the Kiwis, it is an international team. We spoke with Andrea Vicentini, Italian navigator from Trieste. We spoke with him before he went out on the water, and he was saying they allow him to be Italian, but they're trying to make him Kiwi progressively over the season. But they do have a multinational team, but at the core, as you say, the guys like Tony Ray and Murray Jones, Adam Bichel, Robbie Naismith, these guys are. They've been round the block a few times, Fergal, haven't they?
Yeah, they certainly know what they're doing, and whether it was sailing together on 12 metres 20 years ago or sailing a 52, nowadays they're exactly the same bunch, and they're still pulling off the same moves and the same results. And we see now they've everyone seems to have reverted back to the smaller jibs. The breeze has got up a little bit. Sled obviously like the big breeze, so they'll be hoping just to repeat what's been their form this week.
Indeed. And a big win in this last race from Gladiator, you'd imagine. That's the target. Finish on a high note, Fergal.
That's the thing. We haven't been here all season, so we've been out of contention for most things. But yeah, we've let everyone go and sell their own races, and now we're going to come in last one, quick bullet, say goodbye to everyone. Off we go.
Off we go.
That's the dream.
So we've got Jenny Talk. We're at a minute and 30 before the start. Jen, breeze is up a little bit. Only thing really at stake is between Platoon and Quantum Racing, second for the circuit and second for the regatta. Sorry, third for the regatta. Yeah.
Exactly, the silver medal and bronze medal on the podium here, but it's maybe the first time we've seen Sled not quite in the mix. I was just seeing them well out the back of the pack, and yet, as I said, that they kind of pulled themselves forward into slightly better positioning here. But those guys, we almost thought they were going in. I mean, we said mainsail down, maybe that's it, they're done for the day, and yet they've got something to prove. I think if they could win this race, they would tie Quantum Racing for 5 bullets in a row. I think they did that a couple years ago, but we could all say that the caliber of this fleet is just, it's just skyrocketed in the last 2 years or last couple of years. So I think the ability that they've had all week to be able to be at the front of it has been pretty impressive. And unfortunately for Platoon, lining up to windward of Sled, that's not a space you really want to be at the moment. But they are 20 seconds to go. I think good spots here for actually Sled now as they start going bow out towards the fleet. Also Team Vision Future looking great too. Berninisek up the line, 12 seconds, 9 seconds, apologies. Everyone a little bit late. In fact, maybe
Gladiator
5,
later than everyone 4, for some reason. I don't know what's going on there, but and
that's
also
the gun.
There's one other boat who's not even close to the line, and that is Allegra. So they're obviously working on GMT.
who knows what's going on there right now.
Nice start from Berenicek, Jenny.
Yeah, I mean
there's always the kudos of winning the last race of the season, isn't there? You go home and you feel good about yourself.
Oh, you go ashore and you know there's a prize giving, some parties. They'd be happy. I think Berenicek's still in the mix as well. Maybe not for the podium here necessarily, but they kind of have something to prove. They came into this regatta, they were possibly going to be able to fight Quantum Racing for the series podium. They've just not been able to really capitalize on having such a good race here, but still sitting 4th overall for the series, and I think that's a pretty good spot to be, 10 points aft of Quantum Racing, and yet in the overalls they moved up today from what was 7th place to more like 4th, 5th place overall, so they'll be happy with that and they'll have something to prove at the moment.
It's a pretty solid start from Platoon by the looks of things as well.
Yeah, I mean, Platoon, we talked about the battle between them and Quantum. I don't know if they've thought about that too much. They've always been thinking about the top prize and whether they've been going through the results on a piece of paper and seeing where they're at, and whether they're thinking about the fight or whether they're just going out to win the race.
I think pretty much everybody will be just going out to do their best last race possible.
And you look at Sled off the line. I think it's the lowest they've been down the line this week. Of all the starts we've seen, they've always been middle to right hand end of the line. This is the first one they've been down towards the pin. But again, their straight line boat speed off the line is phenomenal. We've just since the start, I've been quietly watching them just pull forward and forward and forward. And when you're pulling forward on boats next to you who've got a clear
a little bit high there. You look at them relative to Azura, they appear to be sailing slightly higher than Azura, although Azura seem to be quite low just to try and come down perhaps on
I think it's
on Platoon. Platoon in a little bit of a sandwich there. Jenny, how's it looking?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could still talk about the scores here, and it's close. 29 points to Azura, 35 to Quantum, and 37 to Platoon. So they're still very much battling for the podium in this event, and yet Sled's just kind of showing everyone what they're made of and why they're so much faster than the rest. I mean, they've honestly put a full boat length on almost the entire rest of the fleet in what is well less than a third of the beat. So I think they've just got this extra set of because this is not decision making here, this is just pure wheels. And again, they're not the only boat team 2018. I think there's 4 of them, Azura, Quantum Racing, as well as these guys, and the 4th team who I'm blanking on right now. So it's not totally just, yeah, Allegre also, yeah. So they've gotten something right in the in the TP53. No, they've gotten something right in their mast and sail design that's just working well, and I think they're in the groove between the trimmers and Mr. Akura driving. And we spoke about it yesterday, how you want a helmsman to believe in the trimmers and to not have to drive too much, and sometimes in the high end of the range and the low end of the range you just gotta rely more on the sail trim and less on the steering, and this regatta has been a spread of everything. You know, we saw the first day where it was super windy, but yesterday it started as quite light and then it built, and today we had breezy medium, kind of maybe 12 knots at the lowest, but it's not like it's just been one solid breeze strength that they've been excelling in. They've been excelling it across the board, and I think it's full credit. Now Provezza has just got a little extra set of wheels here in the last little bit as well, so but Provezza's in a bit harder spot. They're not, I think probably Sled could just tack across everyone at the moment. Provezza's still very much being dictated by Quantum Racing, by Berenicek, by Azura and Platoon as well, to other of them. So it's a good dogfight out the back for who can add themselves the extra jets that Sled has to try to come out of this corner okay.
Hand in hand with what Jenny was just saying then, as she was talking about the sails trim over and the trim of the boat over the helmsman actually steering. We were looking at a shot alongside, and the tiller of Mr. Akura was barely moving. I mean, if you took a real keen eye, it was moving, the smallest of increments. There was no steering through waves. There was zero drag on that rudder. The boat was just going fast forward. He was fully locked in, and that's all you can ask of your helmsman in these conditions. If you haven't got to steer over waves, if you haven't got too many puffs to lean into at all, and you can rely on the crew weight, you're back to dinghy sailing. And you see what they've done. You've got Quantum, who have been the benchmark fastest boat for all these years, it was the standout boat last year that won pretty much every regatta, and they are burning them in probably
With
a
height.
couple of degrees of height and boat speed to put. I mean, any boat, not just Quantum. We say Quantum because they've got the number one on the bow, but any of these boats in a straight line are fast. And the fact that Sled, in the space of 5.5 minutes, have put 20 meters or 40 meters on the boats around them, just going in a straight line,
Yeah.
absolutely phenomenal. And whatever they're
Sailing higher
doing,
than,
don't change a thing.
Yeah. Very, very careful analysis. Who did they train with? Who's their kind of partners?
Allegre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. But a question there coming in, which is appropriate to you, on a question from YouTube, Fergal. Somebody asking about the steering wheels on the Gladiator, the wheels versus the tiller. What are the pros and cons and why?
Certainly for us, it's a pure personal preference. Tony Langley, the owner of Gladiator, is much more comfortable driving on the wheels than the tiller. The boat is faster in a wheel mode for us. We have a rudder that's specifically stiffer than most of the fleet to allow for wheel steering. If you have a rudder that's too stiff on a tiller, you get into a heavy as bear away, and it's very, very hard to pull the tiller. You get a lot of weather helm on that. So our rudder is specifically for wheel steering, and yeah, it's just a personal preference thing. Obviously, you
Personal preference being because he likes to stand and look forward.
Yeah.
And he's also
Yep, it's
he's
just
got a little
that
bit
comfort.
of arthritis, I think, in his hands, hasn't he? And
Yeah, and it's a comfort thing, and we've tried the tiller and the light airs with him, and it's gone back to the end of the day. So no, actually, I prefer the wheels. So if we're faster with the wheels, that's how we go. And the best thing, I mean, the big pro of the tiller is it's just 1-to-1. Wherever you move your hands is
It's
exactly
not
where the
weird,
boat
yeah.
goes. With the wheels, we have a certain ratio in the wheel to chain that has to go back to a quadrant on the rudder, and so you get a little less feel with the tiller. You get a bit with the wheels. You get a bit more weight involved because you've got pedestals, wheels, chains.
what's the difference in weight, roughly?
Roughly 10 kilos.
And
So it's
you
quite a
can,
penalty.
you can change the whole system within 15 minutes or something.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we take 15 minutes to go from tiller to wheels, and about the same to go back if you wanted to go to a tiller. We've had a pro driver in earlier events this year where Tony's been calling the tactics, and we've had a pro driver whose personal preference was the tiller, so we were able to move between the two quite nicely.
So this left side looking quite good for Provezza.
Yeah, certainly looking at that picture there, as long as the left does pay. And I think this is Allegre coming in, the next boat on the left-hand side that they're going to cross by quite a distance. Looks good, but it'll all be down to how Sled have gone. Sled have always done that early tack and they've never really been a ley line boat. They've always gone middle and let the shifts work for them a little more. And I'm sure we're probably going to see this again, but it'll be close between Provezza and Sled at the top, I think.
And Fergal, one of the questions I think some of the teams looked at Platoon's setup. They revealed, I think, in Porto Cervo when they brought on the third grinding pedestal.
Yeah, we went in Porto Cervo. We knew the work they were doing at the time and putting the extra pedestal in. It's I don't think it's to have an extra set of grinders. I think it's more for the heavy airs where you can just get the weight back.
Do you think we'll see more teams adopting that for next year, particularly if we're talking about a potentially very breezy opening two regattas in South Africa? Do you think we could see that coming onto some of the boats?
If you were going to use it, you'd think this was one of the regattas you'd use it in. This has been a breezy event. We've had 2 days cancelled, and all the rest of the races, I think 8 of the 9 races have been raced in 15 plus knots, some of them in 20 plus, and they haven't had it on. So whether it was the gain they thought it was going to be, it's certainly something that when someone does something a little bit radical, everyone's like, oh, is that going to work for us? I guess it depends on the trim of your boat. The Vrolic design has a different trim to the boating.
Yeah, the downside, of course, is it's that much more difficult to move across the back of the boat when it's breezy.
Yes.
It's another obstacle.
Yeah, 2 more guys in your way. But I think if it was a standout feature and everyone's going, wow, that
really worked for them, then let's have a go. But I'd be prepared to bet there'll be at least one more boat in South Africa with 3 pedestals.
Yeah, so I'm not sure.
Not a betting
Maybe.
man, says Virgo.
Not today. Only because I'd lose all my money on sled. I'd say someone else is going to win, and then they'd win another one. So
Preveza raining on the sled parade momentarily, Jenny.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's maybe still a touch too early to call this. Left-hand side looking good, but again, the second they tack over, sled might just be able to keep going faster and pulling boat speed and boat lengths forward. And Preveza, I think they've come to the left, even further to the left from them is Azura and Platoon. It's like Azura has forgotten that they've won the overall title already against Platoon, and instead they just planted one. Now they planted it a bit more kindly on Platoon. They kind of gave them a touch of a leave out instead of just directly in front. But let's keep in mind that that's still the battle for second and third between those two as well as Quantum Racing. So having let Quantum Racing split all the way to the right-hand side now, Azura's kind of got to make sure that when they come back in touch, they come back in touch ahead of them. I think they're 6 points ahead overall for that second place position, but Quantum Racing is only 2 points ahead of Platoon, so there's still a lot on to see who's on the podium aside from sled. We know that if you're only just joining us, we know that they've won this regatta already, which is just extremely impressive. But for Preveza, they've got their own little mini battle. They've got both Phoenix and Brennanasek right near them in the overall scores, and they've not had the best day today. They just had their Spinnaker break in the last race when they actually were doing quite well, I think 4th or 5th. So they dropped all the way to last in that race, and that's hurt them really badly on the overalls going from 5th to 7th. So I think reality is Preveza maybe has something a little bit more to prove, especially as they've had kind of a hard season as well. They've won a regatta, but otherwise they broke their mask. So they would love, I think, as we said about Brennanasek earlier, but for Preveza, they would really love to take this win home. I mean, the last regatta, you'll remember, Andy, they broke their mast and then they came back.
Right.
And they actually, if you forget all the races they missed because of the broken mast, they won the regatta, and they definitely won the last 2 days, both days. So Preveza has something to prove for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, Preveza, they've been strong for the last couple of years. They've always just been outside. They've won regattas and they've taken wins, but they've always just been on like the 4th, 5th side overall. And they're such a strong team with a great kind of like atmosphere inside the team. Ergin really leads the charge on the atmosphere of that team. They do everything together. We've got a few friends on there. And it was such a shame to see their mast come down in the last regatta. But what a credit to all the guys who managed to get it back on the water and racing. And not only racing, but I think they took 2 wins. And like Jenny said, they won the last bit of the regatta. They were winning the first bit of the regatta pretty much alongside sled. So painful to have pretty much a regatta, and not just a regatta, but a world championship kind of ripped away from you. But it's nice that they've come back strong and just showing that they're, against in the face of adversity with a slightly older rig, which isn't quite in tune with what they wanted, which is why they had the new rig. They're still going strong, and it'd be quite nice to see someone else take a win from sled. As much as I'm liking seeing them dominate.
Absolutely. I mean, let's spread the love. And as you say, just it's been a tough year for Preveza as we started this race. It's so important to finish the season with a win. That's what you remember most, perhaps, through the winter, even though it's looking like a short winter for the technical teams and the sailing teams by all accounts. But looking like sled back on top according to Virtual, as perhaps sled, Brennanasek, Quantum.
I think part of the battle with Preveza as well, from coming from the Phoenix camp, with Tony driving his first regatta, and unfortunately Tina couldn't be here due to having a bit of a back problem. I hope she's on the mend, but he'd really like to take a win and go out in style as well.
Yeah, I'm sure he would. But they're certainly in the mix. Great conditions, 20 odd knots, 19, 20 knots, Jenny.
Yeah, really, really nice. I mean, the small die-off in the middle of the day that we were expecting could have been worse has been short-lived, and breeze suddenly just this Maestrale, they say in Sardinia, the Mistral in France, but spelled differently and pronounced differently here, and I'm sure I'm butchering that in all the wrong ways. But it is really, really stunning conditions out here, and I think it's nice again just to see everyone get to stretch their legs in the final race. We had the kind of the barest beginnings of a broach in the last downwind with the Gladiator team. I think the other day you said Brunelesek took it on day 1 or day 2, a little touch of a broach, but Sante Lange 2 days ago when the racing was cancelled for being too windy was kind of saying, you know, why aren't we out there racing? There weren't enough broaches yesterday. We definitely could be racing, and I think the reality is these guys probably like it when the breeze is up and the white horses are out.
I was just reflecting, you know, titles and everything decided. These guys would go and do it for fun, you know, without a doubt, just for the sheer joy of it, you know, just go out and go racing, give them the chance.
Well, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the only reason that any of these teams maybe wouldn't have raced this final race is if they were worried about breaking their boat because another regatta was coming up. But yeah, as you said, while it's a short winter, maybe with the February-March regatta in Cape Town, it's not that short that you won't just come out and have a spectacular day on off the coast of Costa Smeralda. So I think, meanwhile, that is Sled just showing us their composure again, one more time. With a proper solid lead coming into the top mark again, and behind them a little bit of a close battle. There you go, Quantum with a huge duck. So I was wondering if they thought they were going to be able to make Brunelesek, but no, it's Brunelesek into second here, and even I think Phoenix into third as Quantum. Oh no, Quantum okay, threading the needle, which is a fun one. The jury vote's right in the mix there, so if there's any wrongdoing, I think the jury will be able to award something if needed, but it looks like Quantum got away with it. Phoenix then in 4th position.
And Platoon are deep.
Yeah, and are they deep yet? Okay, they're spinning going on, but it's with Team Vision Future out the back, so we didn't even see what happened with Team Vision Future there. So Azura coming in as well, a big duck on Azura for Preveza, just above Allegre. Platoon might be able to squeeze in into Allegre, but it looks like not. This is kind of the first time that we've actually seen that starboard ley line really bunch up and affect the port tackers. Normally the whole fleet was coming in on port and tacking on their own. So yeah, there's Platoon is going in inside of Allegre just aft of Azura, and that's kind of the battle is between those three. Again, Azura only just 6 points ahead of Quantum Racing, who's only 2 points ahead of Platoon, so someone in there could maybe do a little upset on the podium, but I think probably as it stands, Azura is just close enough to Quantum to maintain their second place in this regatta, and their first place overall obviously already sealed in the last race.
There are a few boats between Quantum and Platoon, which is going to be big for the overall and the regatta as well. I think there's 3 boats between Quantum and Platoon. If Quantum can extend and get another place here, we could be looking at either a tie, could be a tie break. I don't know if you can see the projected scores, but Quantum are doing exactly what they need to do to put the pressure on Platoon and maybe get a
second overall.
Maybe get second overall and third on the podium of this regatta. I think we should just ignore Sled and just say, okay, Brunelesek are winning. Go on, Brunelesek.
Go the blue boat. So the unfortunate part for Platoon here, a big, okay, it's coming out now, but a big hourglass on Platoon in their set, and they almost got rolled by Allegre. At least Allegre started to creep towards them, but they've gotten it out now, and you can see just how much windier it is by the lack of Vang on board a lot of these boats, at least out the back. Vang coming back on now on Platoon and Allegre, but if you're worried about the bear away and a boat's to windward of you, then you just give it a little extra ease to make sure it'll all go well.
Perfect conditions to end the season. You know, like the sun's out, the breeze is up, the water's blue. Beer's getting cold outside. It's not the Solent. What's wrong with the Solent?
It's raining. But yeah, Fergal, talk to us a little bit about the possible mods that some of the teams would be considering through this winter. Anything stand out?
Well, I think there's as the boats get a little older and we want to get forestay tensions higher, you might be able to stiffen the boat up a little bit. We're going to a very breezy venue in South Africa. You might be thinking of stiffening the mast up a little bit. I guess the sail designers are thinking a lot about what the wardrobe is going to be for a windy South Africa and then potentially a lighter European season. as you say, there could be people looking into the ideas of what other people have done in other pedestals, things like that. But given the amount of time that we have between this event and to get to South Africa in time for the event at the end of February, we actually have to. It's a 3-week delivery for the ship. We all go on the same ship. We deliver down to South Africa, and that's about 3 weeks. So we actually have to leave, and to give a few people a bit of time off for Christmas. You have to be on a ship around the beginning of the second week of January. So if there's any painting to be done, big modifications. And the modifications, they would have started talks with designers and engineers in the past weeks about what would be happening. 'Cause, it takes time to get the engineering done. A lot of the engineering work comes from New Zealand or America for a lot of these boats, so it takes time to get all these plans together. So I think most of the modifications will be in place if there are any coming. As you can see, the boats are pretty evenly matched, and
in a second, it's the newest boat. I believe they can take about a ton more in the forestay load, and that's the Holy Grail, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a big thing, especially in the big breeze. So looking towards South Africa, can you stiffen areas in the rig? We run stranded carbon backstays in these, which have a touch more stretch in them than the solid ones. A couple of the boats out there have solid backstays, but that might be a modification for other boats to go for a stiffer backstay. Increasing headstay load's a big thing, but you've got to do modifications around the boat and really stiffen the deck, potentially stiffen the hull, just to make sure that you can actually do that without bending the boat in half. These are light boats at the end of the day. They're made from quite thin carbon, and they do tend to stretch and bend a little bit, especially as they age a little bit as well. You put them over some big conditions in cask ice.
Indeed. So just one boat between Quantum and Azura, and between Quantum and Platoon. Well, 2 boats as we speak, but it's pretty close.
I think it would be hard for boats like Quantum to ignore what happened at the end of the last race, where Azura went down into that bottom corner, made huge gains, and I think a few more people have come over this side in this race than doing that early jibe and going out to the left-hand side as you look downwind. You see the breeze is really fresh here, and we're back up to doing 20 knots downwind, and I think that's the perfect way, no matter what your place is, perfect way to finish the season. To have your last race here is to be hammering downwind. It's not cask ice and spray over the deck or what we saw earlier in the week, but still.
But this is classic Porto Cervo, isn't it?
Yeah. As long as it dies down before the delivery, that's all right.
Say again, Andy?
I said, are you enjoying it?
I've had to switch positions on the boat because otherwise I was just getting it straight to the face, the spray of the waves on the motorboat out here. It's salty, to say the least.
Salty. Yeah, but sled on a regatta than they've had. Big question is if you can carry that momentum through until South Africa next year. Who would you guess will make team lineups changes, both of you? Put you on the spot, Fergal and Jenny.
If I was on sled, I wouldn't change a thing.
No,
not a thing.
No.
I think there's always winter transfers on there where a couple of people, we know that a couple of the Olympic sailors on board, Santi and Sime, are going off to do their own Olympic sailing, so we see changes there. Who does Azura get in? Vasco's deep in the America's Cup cycles. Santi's going to the Olympics.
They have 2 options, I believe.
3 if you count me, 4 if you count you.
What about me?
5 if
You're top of the list, Jen.
You're one of the first 2. But
I would only get in the age of being.
Fire that Vasco has.
I would only get in being in the same age as Santi.
But whoever it is, enormous shoes to fill.
Yeah. I think to be fair, on Brunello-Sec, it's a different situation because you're replacing. Do you replace Chime with another top pro driver, or would Vladimir come back and steer? I kind of think that Vladimir will be back to steer. The part of the idea was that he would learn from Chime So we may see that next year.
I think we saw a nice shot of Brunello earlier. I think it was just in the pre-start, and you know, a lot of the time you think of the owners of these boats, either maybe they're not on board or they're letting the team do everything, and then you have you know, a lot of them driving the boats. But we saw in the pre-start earlier, Vladimir on the handles, putting all the work and effort in, and fully being
part of the team.
And that was cool to see. You don't see it very often across the sailing, you know, the whole board of sailing.
Yeah, he loves it. He loves it. Anyway, Jenny, bow number 5, the regatta winners coming through the leeward gate, showboating, really, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely not the first time this regatta we have seen that bow in that position. In fact, it's the 5th time in a row.
150 metres clear.
Yeah, leading around, and there's no chasing them. They've got the speed, obviously. So the second that anyone tries to put some proper tactical moves on them, they just counter it with speed as well as with good decision making. But meanwhile, behind them it is really tight, so it's sled around in first, but Brunello only a very, very slim margin over Quantum Racing, who's kind of come out of what was they were in a tight battle with almost the whole rest of the fleet earlier, and instead they've pulled out to be fighting for second, so they're still aware that they could still sort of be in the overall podium fight with Azura for what's that second place on the podium. Azura only 6 points ahead of them at the moment. So if Quantum could put Brunello in their rear view and just have a couple more boats get in there between themselves and Azura, they could maybe make their bronze a silver. Meanwhile, Phoenix rounding in 4th position. As you guys said, Tony Norris will be happy to have, I think, a top 5 driving the Phoenix today. Provezza really early with the kite drop here. Not sure if perhaps Provezza's got a penalty on the far side. It doesn't look like it. I think they just were worried about the overlap of Azura, so they'd rather be a little bit slow and not overlapped as they no, they do have a penalty. So unclear. Sorry, guys. Not aware of what Provezza is doing, but the really early kite drop conveying off like it doesn't look like what you'd want it to be. Drop. Kite in the water. No, I mean that's soon to be a kite shrimping. I think it's finally just made it all the way in. But as we were stressing about, Provezza platoon has jibed this left-hand side. Behind them, Allegre. Behind Provezza, Quantum Racing. But honestly, Provezza, what is going on there? Fergal, what are they doing?
Oh, it's drop line fail.
Yeah, that's not what you want. And you know, for the boats
this
around.
This is what happens when you know you have the drop lines and it fails or something, or something goes wrong.
There's always the possibility of a mechanical failure. You know, we think that the drop line is such a smooth system, and we see 9 times out of 10 the kite goes down straight down the hatch, beautiful drop. But then there's that one time where it just turns into a disaster. It hasn't been too bad for them there. I mean, they luckily it was on this side of the jib for them really, and it was able to be sucked down pretty easily by the bow team.
Let's have a little look back to that problem for Provezza.
So you're seeing them having to luff around Azura. I think Azura have got room at the mark, and they're probably just coming into the zone there. They do an early drop to go around the back, and it looks like they start to do a jibe as well, and it's not quite down.
It's in the water.
Clue gets sucked around there, and as they jibe round, they're kind of driving over a little bit. Probably hoist it back up a little bit to get it out of the water, and at that point, it's all over the jib, and they've still got one more jibe to do. And it was a funny old gate that. I mean, no one really had an amazing mark rounding except for Sled. A few boats came down in no man's land.
I think a little bit of tiredness creeping into the fleet as well. You know, when there's less to play for, it's the end of the season, and little errors perhaps creeping in.
I mean, we've done 3 races every day in 15+ knots, barring the first race yesterday, which was a light one. They're really long days. You know, they're long days when it's 2 races in 20 knots.
Yeah.
So we've done 3 days of racing with 3 races a day. For sure, there's a bit of fatigue going on.
It's kind of fatigue and focus, isn't it? If you're focused at 100%, that's all you're really thinking about. You're driven by the result, the potential result. That's what keeps you focused. And then when you're really just doing it for minor gains, if you like, then perhaps the fatigue does take over.
There's going to be it'll be probably a good feeling on Phoenix, knowing that, you know, Provezza were breathing down their neck a little bit. They were quite close to them a few points, and they would have caught them up. So Phoenix will be kind of not relaxing, but trying to get up to Brunello now and maybe try and put a boat between them and see if they can move up on this in this regatta.
So a couple of points between Platoon and Quantum Racing just now on the water for the circuit standings. Platoon hanging in there, as indeed they did in Puerto Portals, to win the 2019 world title. But let's not overlook the fact that Zura have been on the podium at 4 of the 5 regattas this season, so assuming they get away with this second. Second in Puerto Sherry by a point, second in Cascais by a point, and second in Puerto Portals by 2 points. You know, that tells a story, doesn't it, Fergal?
Yeah, they've always been picking away. You know, they've been a strong team for 10 years plus from the Matador days when they were picking away when there were 20 boats, and here they're still going strong. We've seen that they've got the same core crew in Guige and Collet, David, all the very similar guys. And if one guy takes a year out, then he might come back the next year or so. And they're always there and they're always chipping away, and that's what's given them the
and their sail program run by Juan Garay is a very, very, very clever designer, isn't he?
He is, yeah. I mean, he's incredibly successful across the whole spectrum of sailing, and he's always been.
He's working with Luna Rossa, isn't he, as head designer, and he's here.
And the other thing you've got to think of Azura is, I'm not sure if in the Super Series they've ever had the number 3 on the bow. It's either been number 1 or number 2. I think this was last year was the first year they had number 3, and they wanted to get rid of that. That was their big focus. Was we don't want this number 3 on the bow anymore. We want number 1, and that was their. I think for me that felt like their goal from day one. They were strong in the training that we went and did in Valencia at the beginning of this year. A lot of the boats had big changes in rudders, in bulbs, in fins. So there was a lot of tuning to be done in Valencia when we did that little pre-season training there. They were strong there, and then they've just been strong ever since. And that it's paid. Everything's paid for them. All the training they've done, all the shore team's hard work, all the behind the scenes has got them to where they are.
And as we said yesterday, I think Santiago Lang growing into the shoes as tactician. It's a very, very different game to what he's been doing. I mean, he's done a lot of big boat sailing, Jenny, hasn't he? I mean, he's done Volvo, he's done America's Cup, and he's done lots of monohull Grand Prix sailing. But it's a different mindset, and it's a different, really fine, subtle racing in these in the TP52s, isn't it? The gains are so small. And I think you were saying previously that if anything, when he came in, he would want to be on the other side of the course and making big gains rather than thinking small scale, thinking move by move.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the hard part is he's got all of that experience in the past, but right now in this year, in this series, aside from the 52s, his full other focus is on his NACRA campaign, and you could not get more different, except for maybe perhaps for Chimay on the 49er versus sailing on Brunello. So in terms of both of those guys, for Chimay driving Brunello, how different must that be than trapezing on a wire with a tiller out the back of you on a 49er, and for Santi the same, to be calling tactics in a 52 where it's kind of hair-breadth fine-tooth comb of difference between second and 10th sometimes at the top mark, and to really, as Guige said it, for him to get used to the game of 52 sailing in this circuit, which is different than any of the other Grand Prix racing he's done. It took a while, and it was we both fell for him in the first felt for him in the first year that he was in the series. You'd be so disappointed in himself sometimes.
And you hit the head in the nail as well, as though it's the NACRA. Then previously, a lot of Santi's Olympic sailing was tornadoes and catamarans, and it's much more apparent wind sailing.